Welcome, my dear brothers and sisters. This is another edition of Convo with the Mano. Normally with Convo with the Mano, we get to meet lovely people in our community. People that you see in the chats, people that you see in different groups like the Telegram group and such. And today we have Germanus, who has been on the show before as a pop-in guest, but now we're going to get the story of the Germanus. Welcome, Germanus.
Thank you, brother. It's good to see you again.
You too, my friend, and soon it'll be in person.
Amen.
So
yeah, I'm open for that.
me too, man. Me too. Like, and it's coming up too. Like, it just hit me this morning. I'm like, oh, it's not that. It's pretty close.
Yeah. So what was the date again? Is it the 5th to the 10th? Is that right?
No, it's the 10th to the 15th. It's April 10th. I did that too in the message. I said August.
Yeah.
April 10th to the 15th.
So you're gonna be here like April 20th, so the 10th. Okay, so yeah, you're gonna be here, or you're gonna be leaving just pretty much right before Holy Week starts. So
correct.
Yeah,
because we're gonna do Holy Week back home in Canada with family and stuff like that. So
do you already know the parish schedule for the church you're gonna be next to up there?
In Toronto, no, but my buddy Peter, he's gonna get me all that, so
yeah.
I'll have that soon. So
good, man. There's nothing like the amount of services that Father Justin does here. I mean, it's just the full cycle. Like, people take the entire week off. That's their vacation. That they're just gonna be here for the whole week. There's folks coming in from out of town just for St. Maximus to be able to embrace the full cycle of services. It's incredible when it happens here. Yeah.
Oh, I get it. I wish I could be there. Probably next year.
Yeah.
God willing. Yeah. Next year we'll be Texans or something. if Texas allows us.
Actually, I've been told by Texans that you actually have to have a grandchild born here to be a Texan if you're from out of state or out of country. So sorry, bud. You're going to have to work at that.
I know. Or I have to start looking at my family tree and see if there's like some long lost great-great-grandfather or something that went to Texas, which, Texas has something that's very appealing to people in my family for sure. So I could see that.
Yeah. So my grandmother's actually from Texas. She lived about an hour and a half away, grew up there in Prosper, Texas. And, so I kind of thought like maybe that's my loophole, So I'm asking my Texan friend, who's a dear friend of mine. He loves to give me a hard time, and I was like, if Grandma was here, does that mean automatically since I moved back that I'm Texan now? And he said no, it doesn't count. Grandchild, and that's some good news to go ahead and share with everybody in the crew. Is I'm about to be a grandpa, which is incredible. However, unfortunately, my grandbaby will not be born in Texas, but will be born just north in Oklahoma. So I'm looking forward to meeting my little sweet boy when he comes out here. So.
Well, first of all, a massive congratulations. That's excellent. That's beautiful. And second, you could make a suggestion that they birth the child in Texas.
I mean,
back to Oklahoma.
No, unfortunately, they've already got it all made. In fact, my suggestion was even, what if I brought up a bag of dirt from Texas and just slid it under the bed at the right moment, the birthing bed, and then at least I can say that the baby was born on Texas soil. Yep. And no, that wasn't enough. So it's kind of crazy to me too, like how much I love it here, because we've been here since 2019, and we'll get into all of that, but we've been here since 2019, and I lived in California for like the first 20 years of my life, and then Oregon for over 20 years. And then, when I moved here, if you'd have told me when I was in California, like you could one day live in Texas, like I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed you at all. And part of that is, due to some of what we're taught on the West Coast,
for sure,
about what people in Texas are like, and it's just a part of the culture of the Westies to have a certain mentality about the South. So it's pretty crazy.
That's so true. I can relate to that myself. Although I did have this odd attraction to Texas even when I was younger. But I did have like preconceived notions as well. But I did have an attachment and love for Texas. Maybe it's because of the music thing. maybe it's because any Texan I had ever met was super cool
Uh-huh.
in a way that I couldn't really explain. But yeah, up north in Canada and Toronto, they probably even have worse opinions of Texans than they do in the West Coast, or maybe not. The West Coast
Probably
people really
similar.
don't like. Probably very similar. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But when I went to Texas, as you know, um, I was more than pleasantly surprised. It was great in every which way. Like the worst thing I can say about Texas is like meaningless. Like which is this. It's so big that everything is so far apart. That's the only thing I didn't like. That it wasn't a walkable area. But I'm sure there's parts of Texas that are walkable. Other than that, man, Texas is the bomb. The people are the bomb. The food's the bomb. The music's the bomb. Like everything's sick about Texas, man.
Yep, yep. I mean, honestly, I'm probably the that uh, unintentional spokesman for Texas now, and I don't know. I don't ever want to leave. If I can help it. I don't see a lot of uh, opportunities in the rest of the country that I've gotten here
Mm-hmm.
since I've been here. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this
Yeah,
is a good place to live. A very good place to live. I'm really happy to raise my family here. So it's done a lot of really
blessed.
positive things. So
You're blessed. All Texans blessed to be in Texas, and hopefully, sometime soon we will be able to say something similar, and at
yeah,
least share tables with you guys and hang out and all
yeah.
that stuff.
God bless. God bless.
All right. Okay, let's just jump into this here, my
Get
dear
into it.
brother.
All right.
I want you to kind of I want to get your story. Everyone that knows you through the chats and all that, they know the Germanus that appears on screen and all that. But what got you to that place where you are today, to the person that you are now, who I adore and love, like a dear brother? And just like most of our lives, there's a lot of trials and tribulations along the way that create the character we are. And of course, God guides us through this and gets us to this point. So begin wherever you want to begin, because I know your story, as you described it, others have described it, your story, as the Forrest Gump of the 90s. Is that correct? Is that the
Yeah.
description that you've heard?
Yeah. That's what actually I've had somebody tell me that. And it was just me kind of giving them a rundown. It was actually one of my people who, well, he's a godson or will be soon. So yeah, he was. We just started sharing stories together, and he just kind of shockingly says that, like, "Wow, your life kind of sounds like Forrest Gump of the '90s." Never really thought of it that way, but yeah, let's get into it, and I'll kind of explain, and I think hopefully that'll unfold. So,
All right.
yeah, okay. So I started out. I was born in Los Angeles, California, and I was born to a family that had I wouldn't exactly say they were equally yoked. My mom wanted the bad guy, but with the good heart, and so she was attracted to my dad. He was a tattooed guy. He was in the Navy. He rode a motorcycle, and she came from the Baptist upbringing. They wanted her raised well, and my grandfather was an upstanding man in the church, an usher, and eventually a deacon, and he helped build churches in Los Angeles that are still standing to this day as a foreman and a contractor for them. And yeah, so she was raised, kind of typical Valley girl growing up in the '60s primarily. She had a bunch of older siblings, and dad was from kind of a rougher background, rougher family. And when he was 17, he enlisted into the Navy and went to go to Vietnam. And he was only in there for about a year and a half before the war ended. So 2 years in, he was discharged with a general discharge or honorable discharge, and then he immediately went into like security.
Mm.
He's an artist, so he painted signs on the side. Back in the day, the old like pinstriping that some artists would get into to do on cars. He did a lot of that for
Oh yeah.
work. And then eventually he just fell into the security career, and then he loved it so much that he had a heart for service and protecting others.
Mm-hmm.
Based on his own childhood traumas and stuff that he went through, he was like, I don't want those things to happen to others. And so he enlisted into the Los Angeles Police Department, so yeah, he ended up being a cop for about 25 years. And the first 8 years of my life, from what I don't really remember much of it. I have about maybe a handful of five memories at most of what my childhood was like. And it's kind of strange because those were actually pretty good years. My parents fought a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Dad was pretty stoic. You couldn't get a reaction out of him,
Mm-hmm.
which made him a good cop, but made him maybe not so great as far as like responding to his family and their needs. And mom, was probably she was fiery redhead, angry short lady with red hair and Irish roots, Scottish roots and stuff. So she'd get worked up, and so they just fought all the time. And that's what I remember is they fought all the time. I remember like a couple of different memories, and one of them was a really good camping trip. But then after the camping trip, my sister and I went on. I have one sister, and I have a half brother who's like 18 years younger than me. Uh, and so my sister and I, we went on the camping trip with the parents. When we got back, we was at Yosemite,
Mm-hmm.
and we got back, and it wasn't too much later that we were living in Simi Valley at the time, and my parents just told us we're gonna get a divorce, and I wasn't really surprised. That was like looking back on it now, I can tell you that like I didn't know anything about what a divorce was. There wasn't a lot of kids that I was growing up with that I knew that was kind of going on or what the word was even, but I knew something big was going to happen. Something intuitively inside me knew that something big was going to happen in my life. And so when they told us, although we were upset and we kind of cried together as a family, even though this thing was going to happen, it was almost like it was completely out of everybody's control. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like I don't think my parents really had a solution, and so this was like kind of the end game, right? It's like, well, we don't know what else to do, so
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we just can't live together because it's not conducive to a healthy relationship for anybody. And they were young. I don't think they were very in love. I think that their idea was, they were infatuated with each other, and they had an idea that they wanted to be married sometime and have children,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think they really knew each other very well. And frankly, divorce was pretty rampant around that time as a
So
as an
true.
out, as an
Yeah.
excuse for people. And so yeah, so they made the decision. And so I chalk it up to the fact that like from that point on is where my memories really start.
Oh,
Is
I see. I see.
after my parents split up and what happened then. From that point on, I remember a lot of that, but before then, not really much. And so I guess I just chalk it up to that's probably just a traumatic memory block,
Yep. Yep.
and there's not really a way to explain that otherwise. So what's interesting though is that gave me a perspective on kids who come from backgrounds or parents or adults even now who come from backgrounds that where they had heavy stuff happen in the past,
Mm-hmm.
is that they kind of lose a piece of themselves.
Very
Um,
true. Very
and they
true.
do that. I did that. I think so that I could cope
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
the big change that happened, and then also kind of you kind of have to have an identity reboot because who you are
Yep.
doesn't have to do with the people that were all in your lives, and we're totally tied as individuals. We're totally tied to our community
Mm-hmm.
to say who we are, to understand who we are as a person.
This is
Um,
true.
and so when that's fractured, well, then who am I? There's no answer for it unless you kind of start over again, right?
So true.
So this is kind of what I
Sorry
experienced.
to also to point out that 0 to 6 are the most important years of your life in terms of development and character building and identity. So a lot of people that have had early childhoods like yourself, I always find when I talk to them, those first 6 years, they do block things out because that's a mechanism that they use to kind of like, avoid the situations. And I think you make a lot of good points there.
Yeah. So another way that I coped with probably not knowing myself anymore
Mm-hmm.
is that I became kind of a liar, and eventually like pathological, like it just got away with me. And I mean, when I mean pathological, I mean it in the literal sense. Like I could say things, tell a story about my life, and I would believe it. I would convince myself of it. And I could even, I'm a pretty visual person. I could even imagine a
Mm-hmm.
memory
Mm-hmm.
to come up. And then that memory would be locked and ingrained in my brain. And I would never even question it anywhere. If it was a lie that I perpetuated and I continued to say it, it would just become a memory.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I could have passed a lie detector test. I wouldn't have known the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, that was a way to cope because I needed to tell the story of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day, I needed to have those stories be really interesting so that people would like me because I needed approval from others.
Right.
And so being a pathological liar just kind of became an ingrained part of who I was for many, many, many years. I struggled with that. And so, yeah, moving on, I had to, to flash forward just real quickly when I came into the church and I accepted life at life's terms and accepted Christ on his terms. That meant that I was encountering truth, and therefore I had to be completely truthful with myself
Absolutely.
and drop all the lies. And so if I knew that there were any that came up as a habit of being, of telling them to people, um, he would kind of like make me aware. No, that's a lie. Remember, and
Mm-hmm.
I would have to then go back and quite bluntly and honestly tell people, you know what, actually, I misspoke. That was something I used to say to people, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not correct. And I had to do that quite a lot to like break that habit. So it is incredibly humbling and a really good thing to have to go through because I know where it came from and I know where I want to go, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
know that I want to be a whole human being again, and to be restored in Christ. And so yeah, it was rough, but it was incredibly good and cathartic for me to do. So yeah.
I can.
Anyway,
Sorry, just a point on that though. That's
yeah,
really good for you, and I'm happy you brought that up, and I'm happy you told us about that because that's a very important thing that you just said there, especially coming back to the church and taking responsibility and accountability for your lies. So even when you were doing them, to apologize, that's a hard one, and I can relate. Like that stream that I did when I was jamming and I was playing
yeah,
the lie song. Now I understand that you understand.
yeah.
Yeah,
You get
so
it.
I can relate. I can relate.
Yeah. So there I am. I'm a kid. Uh, Mom moved into a apartment that she could afford while working as an accountant and or as a payroll clerk or something like that. And then Dad, he was a security guard at the time, and they sold the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the family home. That was our second home. The first one was in Reseda. Second one was in Simi Valley. And then they sold the family home and we both basically moved into apartments. And my sister and I stayed with my mom. And over the summer, that summer, we went to a Christian school, a private school. And I don't know how all that situation went out, but with as far as like who afforded it or whatever. But we went to a Christian private school during the summer for the summer school program, and Dad encouraged me to get into karate. He was a martial arts guy, so he encouraged me to get into karate. And my sister came along too, and she went into, I don't know, arts and crafts or something for the summer. And I got into the karate program, and it's funny because so I was in this karate program, and I really, really enjoyed parts of it, but there was something I really didn't enjoy, and that was that the instructor used to get us all together at the end and kind of, okay, circle up, and
Mm-hmm.
then we're going to round robin test what we've learned today and do some open hard sparring with each other. And the kid I had to spar was just this oaf of a kid, and story of my life. I'm a little guy. I've always been small in stature. I mean, I'm 5'4". Now I weigh 200 pounds for 5'4", but back then I was a real scrawny little kid, and so this dude, he and I were throwing kicks and punches, and then he just tackled me and got me to the ground. He was a lot bigger than me, and he put me on the ground and he just pinned me, and I couldn't swing, and he would just block punches, and he would just hold me there, and I just got so mad and frustrated because I felt like there's nothing I could do to stop this kid from doing what he's doing. And that's a real eye-opening experience. Anybody who's done, jujitsu or any other martial art, like, when you first experience for the first time being in a position where you're completely powerless to someone else being able to do whatever they want, that is an eye-opening experience. It humbles you, and if it's under the right circumstances, it can actually help form you and shape you into a strong person. But it has to be with people that you feel comfortable with and that you're safe with. And in this situation, I didn't feel really safe. So after that, I bowed out. I was like, I'm not gonna. I don't want to mess with that. Like, karate sucks. uh,
Yeah.
so I broke out of it. I didn't want to go into it anymore. Dad wasn't at home; he was off doing his thing. So for me, I think I probably needed a little encouragement to stay in it, but I didn't have that, and so the summer school was wrapping up, and it's kind of funny. So back in my 20s, I was like looking at a black belt magazine on my dad's kitchen counter. We went for a visit, and it was a really old one. And I'm like, "Whoa, I didn't know you collected these still." And he's like, "Oh yeah, this one's pretty cool." And on the cover, he's like, "Oh yeah, you know that guy that's on the cover?" I said, "No, who is that?" He's like, "That's your old karate instructor." And he was on the cover of Black Belt magazine. It turns out his name was Benny the Jet Yuquidez. So anybody who knows anything about karate, like, that was the instructor. He was an actual guy who went over. He's very, very well known kickboxer. Um, so it's kind of cool. Um, and so anyway, we were finishing up the summer school, and my sister and I got to watch with all the other kids. We all got kind of grouped together, and we got to watch this mini series that had been created in the 80s. And I forget the name of it. Oh, was it? I think it was called Thief in the Night.
I don't know
And
that one.
so this is a Christian school,
Okay.
and this is a kind of evangelical bent Christian school. And I think it was called Thief in the Night, but it was basically like the same thing as like the later version. What was the name of that movie series? It was kind of that came out. The guy from Family Ties produced it, but it was on Armageddon, right? And like the Rapture and all that stuff, and which is in a huge focus in evangelical
Oh
Protestantism.
yes. Oh
And
yes.
so in the 80s, this one that came out, Thief in the Night, uh, it starts off with just this family, and you know, dad's in the bathroom and he's shaving, and uh, suddenly, I think, yeah, the new one's called Left Behind series. So
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
so but this is like that. Left Behind got its ideas off of this original one from the 80s. And so the dad's in the bathroom and he's shaving, and then suddenly everything goes quiet, and the mom notices that everything's quiet in the bathroom, starts kind of talking to him through the door,
Yeah.
and then she opens the door and he's not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of how the whole thing kicks off, is that like, people have disappeared. There's, a sudden amount of panic, and there's chaos, and planes are falling out of the sky, and the whole nine yards.
Oh, you're
And then
talking about it wasn't Family Ties. It was Kirk Cameron. Now that you said it,
Kirk Cameron, yeah.
the Growing Pains guy. Yeah, because now
Growing
as you're describing this, I'm like, oh, this is like that Kirk Cameron
Yeah, yeah.
weirdo thing. I was
Right,
like, how is this
right,
Christian? I remember when I was first
right,
introduced to the Rapture, I'm like, how is this a Christian thing? How come I don't know about this thing?
right.
Anyway, sorry, keep
Yeah.
going.
So, but well, anyway, yeah. My mom, she was kind of attracted to this stuff,
Yeah.
and although we went to a pretty traditional Southern Baptist church, there was a lot of this in the 80s and 90s, of this like stream of Protestant evangelicalism that was coming in, where pastors like Buck Johnson's old pastor, Hagee,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so many others. They were starting up their own non-denominational, as you'd call it,
Yep.
Protestant churches, which is a denomination. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Um, but then between them, the argument or the discussion seems to revolve a lot, at least back then, because I've been out of touch with that stuff for a long time. It revolves around, um, you know, are you pre-trib? are you pre-tribulation or are you post-tribulation, right?
Yes.
Like, and,
Yes.
and they want to know kind of where you stand on it, and then they argue for their case and stuff. But it's okay, no matter what. Like, we're all Christians; it's all the same. It doesn't really matter. What it really comes down to is what's essential, and what's essential really is kind of, well, that's an obtuse thing because it's not.
Absolutely.
It
Yep.
doesn't. They're not saying what's essential, or at least if they are, it's only what's essential to them, which really doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything in the scheme of things, and definitely doesn't have anything to do with original Christianity or the church fathers. So, um, okay, got off on a tangent there. So,
No, it's a good tangent, man. I love your tangents. Keep rolling. Keep
so,
rolling.
so, so I'm a kid, and I'm watching this show every day, this miniseries with my sister. It's a terrifying miniseries. I don't know why they would show this to children.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
not good. There was, there's bloody stuff on it. There was, just a lot of, there's beheadings at the end. There's people getting tattoos on their hands that are supposed to be like the mark of the beast, and they're being forced into prison camps and stuff like that. And okay, it's like it's an interpretation of Revelations, and they've kind of gone off the rails with this thing. And but for little kids to be watching this stuff, it really played an effect on me.
Okay.
And what it did is it made me. I think I kind of caught on to this fever of that I'm living personally in the end times. Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to preface that with saying
Mm-hmm.
that as an Orthodox Christian who loves the writings of Father Seraphim Rose,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I do believe that yes, it is later than you think,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and uh, I would be a fool to argue otherwise. However, what I believe that watching those miniseries videos on VHS when I was a kid, or I think it was Betamax even.
Yeah.
um, what it
Classic.
was what it was doing was kind of forming me and preparing me down the road for taking the spiritual side of life seriously, and for being aware of the fact that I'm not really of this world. That God has prepared us all for something much greater than what we see before us,
Mm-hmm.
and that really made an impact on me for the rest of my life, still to this day. And it made an impact in a lot of different ways. We'll get into those, but summer school let out, and I think I stayed on for 1 year at that school, and then we just continued to bounce around as my mom tried to, level up her life every opportunity she had. Dad was pretty consistent with I think it was really consistent actually with paying for child support, and we saw him fairly consistently throughout our childhoods.
That's good.
Where he
That's
would pick
good.
us up for visits, and we had a lot. We had no problem with spending the night over at his house for the weekend or whatever when he could do it. And there was still a lot of turmoil. My mother, she did the best she could with what she had, and I have to say that. I don't know how these single moms do it. It's incredible, but nobody does anything without any help from others. Like we all have to have help from other people. Anybody who's saying that they did it on their own is lying.
Absolutely.
And my mother, she had a lot of help from her parents, and so for a time we lived with them. And by the time I had a lot of freedom, man. We're talking, this is the 80s and up to the early 90s. I mean, kids, like, we rode around when my parents were still together. We had neighborhood kids, about 9 of us, that all rode our bikes
Oh yeah.
everywhere together and caused trouble together. And, we go into
Classic.
each other's houses. We didn't even knock on the door. We would
Yep.
just walk in and go sit down and watch, Saturday morning cartoons with each
Yep.
other. So we had a lot of freedom growing up. As long as you were home by the time the street lights came on, yeah, then
Mm-hmm.
we did all
Were,
the typical
were
Gen
you a
X.
latchkey kid?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was a latchkey kid. Even when my parents were married, I was a latchkey kid, um, because they both had to work. So
Mm-hmm.
my sister
Yep.
and I, we got home from school, and I would on the way home from school, I'd walk home, and there was a cinder block wall next to us that had a hole in it, and I would take my homework and crumple it up and push it in the hole, and then we'd keep on going to get home. When my mom saw me that night, she said, "Did you do your homework?" "Oh, they didn't give us any homework." "Oh, okay, no problem."
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
Yep. And then it was, get on your bike and ride around, and then come home by the time the streetlights were on or Kung Fu Theater was on, and then chill out and watch Kung Fu Theater, and you knew it was bedtime when MASH was on.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then I would lay in the hallway. After they put us to bed, I'd lay in the hallway and watch MASH
Yeah.
down the hallway, on the TV, and just lay down on the carpet, on the shag carpet, and watch MASH until I fell asleep, and then they'd pick me up, put me in bed. Um, and yeah, but anyway, so we had it was a pretty typical 1980s childhood, but by the time the 90s came around and my mom was divorced, um, then there was a lot of trouble that I got into because I had so much freedom. Um,
Right. Right.
you know, uh, Started out with, I had a friend. I was 13 or 12 at the time, so I was a skater kid from the very beginning. My first board was a Veriflex,
Mm-hmm.
and had the red plastic wheels, and
Oh yeah.
so I remember I actually I tried to do a trick, and I was just trying to like learn how to do 360s, and I was doing really fast, and I was whipping around on the sidewalk, and I fell. Board went flying one way, and I cracked my head, and I was out cold, and I woke up about an hour or two later. Had a total concussion, I'm sure.
What? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's.
but that started my skateboarding life. Was like 12 or 13 years old, and so that was like when the freedom really expanded, because instead of just staying in my neighborhood, I
Yeah.
could end up all the way on the other side of town and still be back by the time the streetlights were on.
Yep.
And so, growing up at that point, I was in Orange County because we lived with my grandparents, and so that was Tustin and El Toro, and so that area was pretty amazing, because it was a really safe area of California to live in, to be growing up in, and there wasn't really a lot of trouble you could get into. The gangs were all pretty much in Los Angeles still at that point, and so I loved that part of my childhood because I just had a ton of freedom. I didn't see my mom till she got off of work. Sometimes she worked two jobs. And so sometimes we didn't see her till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And so I'd cook meals for me and my sister. Or the microwave was a great use to us
Mm-hmm.
all. Or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we just eat a dry packet of ramen with the sprinkling seasoning on top. And or rice cakes with some peanut butter.
My mom is cringing right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Keep going. Keep going.
yeah, yeah. And yeah. So growing up in El Toro and Tustin. Eventually, I went to high school in Tustin. But by the time I was 13 years old, man, I was already getting into smoking cigarettes,
Mm-hmm.
looking at things that I shouldn't have been, and just whatever antics I could get into that were usually influenced by kids that were older than myself. Because in the summer, all the kids are out from all the ages. And so you run into teenagers, when you're a middle schooler, you run into high schoolers at the comic store and
Yeah.
places like that, or the arcade, and or out in front of the mall or whatever. And so, we'd start talking with kids, and so I got into a lot of things, especially I got into a lot of drugs, and that started really early. By the time I was 13, I was already into drugs. And
Which one? What type of drugs, if you don't mind me asking?
well, what's funny is the first encounter I ever had with a kid who was on drugs. He was on acid, and I didn't know what acid was.
Right.
But my first experience with drugs was probably pot. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was pot.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then eventually I did get into using psychedelics, specifically acid, quite a bit
Mm-hmm.
as a kid. And then all that stuff was interesting, but uh, what I really liked was I wasn't really into drinking a lot. A lot of kids, they want to go to a house party at somebody's house, and they all want to get beer. I would drink a beer, but I was not the guy who wanted to get wasted. I watched a lot of friends get wasted. I watched a lot of stupid stuff happen because of it. But for me, that wasn't the thing. I really wanted to be in control, because I felt like so much of my life I didn't have a lot of control over my life.
That makes sense.
It was kind of the same reason I embraced skateboarding so much, is it was a way to like have control over my life, have the freedom to do what I want to do, not what other people are telling me to do. And yeah, so by the time I was 13, I was getting involved in that stuff. But by the time I was about, well, I'll get into that, but about 15 is when I started to get into meth.
Mm.
And but here I am, 13 years old. And I think I've told this story a little bit before, but just to recap, was the comic book store was like my favorite place to go. I was super into Marvel characters. I love drawing. I've always been an artist. Not so much anymore since I've been a dad. It's kind of hard to find time for that kind of stuff. But
For sure.
um, I haven't made it a priority in these years. But Wolverine, he was my favorite character, and he was the angry buff short guy of the whole group,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and he had a great backstory. And when the graphic novels for him started coming out, and they tell the whole backstory of him, that's when I was kind of hooked. And I got into to drawing him a lot and going to these comic stores as much as I could. I'd spent all my money on comics when I was a kid,
Mm.
and so this I remember this one day in particular. I'm riding my skateboard to the comic store, and I see a patch on the ground in the gutter, and it was a Crass patch, the punk rock band. And
Oh yeah.
so it's the anarchy symbol. I didn't even know what it was at first. I just knew that it said Crass, and it was an anarchy symbol, but with the crossbar of the A being a broken AK-47.
Yep.
And so I'm like, oh, this is cool. And it looks like a punk rock patch. And I kind of know what punk kids look like. So
Mm-hmm.
I always liked them. They seem to be edgy and different. And I liked edgy and different. So I was attracted to that stuff. So when I got to the comic book store, I asked the dude, the guy who was selling comic books. I was like, hey, this band? And he goes, oh yeah. And he just, like, my whole world opened up to this, variety of music that just was wild and crazy. And the only
What did
world,
he hand you? Sorry,
what's
before
that?
you, what albums did he hand you, or what did he suggest?
Well, oh, he played. This was the thing. He just started putting on
Yeah,
music.
yeah, yeah,
Have you checked on this? Like, he
yeah,
had a
yeah, yeah,
radio set up or a stereo set up with
yeah.
a turntable
The
in
good old
the
days.
shop. So he was just like, oh, let me, open up your mind to this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so he played, like, so many different genres, but specifically, like, he was into punk too. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it was like, and punk for him was a lot wider variety than I think in the 80s and 90s. Punk
Yes.
could be anything from,
Yes.
like, you could be
Yep.
listening to Love and Rockets on one end,
Yep.
and maybe Susie and the Banshees or the Sugar Cubes or something like that. To which, any kid who had Thrasher magazines back in the day remembered that they would sell these albums, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then all the way to, like, maybe Fugazi or Gorilla Biscuits, or down the road, like Misfits, something like that.
So true.
Um, and
Even things like REM back then, you'd
yeah,
get like
yeah,
things
right,
like that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
Talking Heads, yeah,
exactly,
right. So
exactly.
yeah, I mean, it was punk was just kind of whatever didn't fit into commercial mainstream radio
Exactly.
music,
Yep.
right? And so, you know, kind of the world's your oyster if somebody, opens up your experience to all of this stuff. And I was I kind of felt privileged to, like, be able to, like, come and step into this world of music. And music for me was really important,
Mm-hmm.
because I noticed with music, and I don't know if I could put it into words back then, but I noticed with music that music kind of provides for you another piece of identity, right? Because within
Yes.
music is subculture, and then you find friends that are of like mind or on a certain subject, and so now you've got a family, you've got people
Mm-hmm.
that you can relate to things about, and there's a whole lifestyle, what kids are into,
So true.
or what adults are into, even about the stuff that, like, had to that was connected to that music, right? So um, that was the music I was super attracted to. I had a friend growing up for a few years that was in a wheelchair. He was a good friend of mine. His name was Stevie, and Stevie was totally a metalhead. This dude loved Metallica and Megadeth and all these bands, the hair bands, and he was a drummer. Because he could still use his left calf and foot, and
Okay.
so that was his bass pedal foot. And this kid was buff. He was yoked because he was always riding around in his wheelchair. And he was a good friend of mine for a little while, until he wasn't. I had a really hard time making friends, or I should say, keeping friends. Making them was okay,
Yeah, yeah.
always been pretty social, but keeping them was a hard part. And
Mm.
a lot of that had to do with the fact that we would just move around so much.
Mm.
And you have to be really invested when it comes to friendship. You have to be really invested in a person
Very true.
to
Very
maintain
true.
a friendship.
Very true.
Uh, you have to be able to be willing to take the good with the bad.
Hmm.
And for me, I don't think I was very good at that. And so he and I didn't end up sticking around for too long, but for about 4 years, we were good friends. But his music was on the metal side of things, and so that was kind of my first exposure to music that was outside of the mainstream. But
Hmm.
that stuff became mainstream really fast.
Really fast. Yeah.
Um, and there was a radio station, Pirate Radio, that was played out of the West Coast that was pretty popular with kids who didn't want to listen to like Kiss FM and the radio stations that were more common to listen to, more popular, that played more like MTV. And I remember the first day MTV was on. Man, that was a life changer. That was a pretty interesting experience. I think I was
Oh yeah.
about 8 years old when it turned on that first day, and all of my friends were all sitting around a TV waiting for that to kick on. And once it did, that show kicked on. Oh my gosh, it was like listening to music that
Do you
we
remember
just
the very first song they played? I could tell you.
was it Video Killed the Radio Star?
That's what it was.
Yeah, and then
Starship or whatever they were called.
Dire Straits I think was on the playlist as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. 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 That was
And then
that was it.
Cyndi Lauper, Madonna, like the Michael Jackson, they were all on the playlist.
Yeah.
Um,
It was a weird time. I remember it. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
oh,
But
that's
as soon as I
good.
heard it,
Yeah, that was a good little question actually. Yeah, it'd been a long time since I thought about that. But music. I mean, even from the time I was 8 years old, I had a girl that I had a crush on who was a year older than me. That was my neighbor, and she had a sister who was a teenager, and her sister would bring home records and put them on for us, and we'd listen. We'd all just sit around and listen to music, and she'd bring home, Slick Rick and
oh
Run
yeah,
DMC and the Fat
yeah,
Boys,
yeah, yeah,
and she'd bring home. Uh, I don't know, man. There was so many interesting like groups and bands that were coming out around that time, and I just got away with being able to watch it. A lot of this stuff happened at my friends' houses because growing up in my own house,
of course.
my mom wasn't gonna let that fly.
Oh yeah,
But hey, can I go spend the night over at this person's house? And now all of a sudden I'm watching Friday the 13th or
yeah,
Nightmare on
yeah,
Elm
yeah,
Street,
yeah,
or
totally.
something like that. Because most,
My parents wouldn't even let me watch the Thriller video.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That was scary, man.
Yeah, it was for the time, you sure.
Yeah. So yeah, then this experience with music, getting into punk rock, really I think it impacted me more than the other music did.
Yeah.
It there was a lot of anger in the music, and there was a lot of political mentioning, speaking about politics in a way that wasn't what the mainstream narrative was speaking about. I mean, I remember the first time I ever heard a punk rock band. I can't remember who it was, but it might have been the Vandals or something like that. But they were their lyrics were against Ronald Reagan. Oh, it was Dead Kennedys.
Oh yeah,
And
of course. Yeah, yeah.
so I'm listening to Dead Kennedys, and they're talking about Ronald Reagan, but my parents were big supporters of Ronald Reagan, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know anything about politics at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that the Iran Contra affair had just ended, and Oliver North had pretty much fallen on his sword for the president and taken the heat. And there was a lot of politics were kind of in the background, but our parents were always paying attention to that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then this punk music was also paying attention to this stuff, but in a way that was contrary to what my parents were saying.
Yes.
And at the time, I picked up on that, and it made me question narrative from a very young age,
Mm-hmm.
question whatever the common narrative was, and get me interested in wanting to look at it from a lot of different angles. And that probably helped me to keep an open mind to things and not just fall into a lot of traps.
Yep.
Um, but on the other end, what I don't think I noticed. It's kind of funny. I've gone back over the last year or so, and kind of gone through my old library of the music that I used to listen to a lot of the old bands, and I've just been checking them out lately. And it's kind of hard to listen to now as an Orthodox Christian. A lot of this stuff,
I know.
a lot of it I end up having to turn off. Like I can't listen to a full song, but
Yeah.
what I noticed is how much of it was actually socialist and
Oh
communist
yeah.
agenda
Oh
within the
yeah.
punk scene that
Big
I
time.
I wasn't aware of, that it was that it had that label at the time.
Big time. Big time.
Um, so anyway, uh, when I was let's see, I guess I was about 13, 13 and a half. I was a skater kid. I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning by this point, and go out with. I'd wake up my friends, knock on their windows, and get them all to come out and go skating. And we'd go skating all around the neighborhoods, all the way across town, and then come back before our parents had to leave for work, get back in our beds, and then once they had left, we all pretty much did the same thing, had the same lifestyle. So then we would walk ourselves to school or skate to school. And so like there was a movie back then. It came out a little later, but Gleaming the Cube with Christian Slater, and that was a skater movie. It was like pretty popular back then, but it told a lot of the life of like what it was kind of like growing up in Orange County to be a skater kid. You had your Asian friends, the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese and the Korean immigrants that had moved to LA and Orange County, that were intermixed with the population of all these white kids, and we would just skate around. There wasn't really like racism wasn't really a thing.
Yeah. So true.
Um, Everybody was just everybody. Like there wasn't any barriers for kids growing up. And the trouble that we got into was all pretty common. So a lot of us Gen Xers on the West Coast have pretty much the same story,
Mm-hmm.
um, and coming from divorced families and things like that. And so we could all pretty much relate to each other. I don't know how the rest of the country was, but that was the West Coast, lifestyle. And but
How did
I was
how did you start like combining all of these events into your personality? Let's say like how did you identify? Like I'm not trying to be cheesy, but because today when you say to someone, how do you identify? It could mean like I don't mean it in that way. I mean it like in reality. Like how did you view yourself? Like being part of this group. A lot of the things you touched upon can develop a character, can
yeah.
develop an identity.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think I was always constantly looking for who I was,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like like an imposter syndrome, or
Oh yeah.
I felt like a poser.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
like if I couldn't skate as good as I had a friend, his name was Chris Chakos, and Chris
Mm-hmm.
Chakos was an insane skater.
Mm-hmm.
He would do things like just that he was capable of doing things that were just way better than what I could do. But he would skate with me and put up with my antics or whatever. And I was a lippy short kid that liked to pick fights,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and he would put up with me. But as far as character goes, he had a better sense of awareness of self and a better
Mm-hmm.
character to his personality. He was more
Yep.
truthful, honest, um, and also he was incredibly talented. Myself, I wasn't a very talented skater. I love skateboarding because it gave me freedom, but I wasn't a very good skater kid. So I didn't really feel like a skater. I felt like a poser
Me
amongst a
too.
bunch of skaters
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
that I just fell into and wanted to be like, but I never really felt like completely settled in who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, and you're going to see this theme throughout my whole life, is it all goes back to identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who am
For
I?
sure. For sure.
Right?
For sure.
And so I moved in between a lot of different groups because of that. Like I was a skater kid, sure, but like by the time I was in high school, I would go. I knew the kids in the jock community and the cheerleading community. I knew the kids in the gang communities, and I knew the kids in the graffiti kid community. Like
Mm-hmm.
all the graffiti writers. Um, and I knew the stoner kids that wanted to go down and smoke off the campus, every day. So I was super social, but not really tight with anybody as friends.
I see.
And I liked to be known by everybody,
Yep.
but I didn't want to be known on the level of like what a true friendship has, because you got to be vulnerable,
For sure. 100%.
and I didn't really want that. So because being vulnerable sucks. So um,
Especially at that age.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially awkward teenage years,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Like you don't know who you are, so you
Yeah.
definitely don't want anybody else to know
Definitely.
anything about you.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, so one thing that happened was my mom got remarried when she started dating a guy when I was about 12, and by the time I was 14, she was married to him. And I was just I entered into school at a little older than my peers, so I was usually about a year. Also, my birthday falls in August, so I was usually about almost a year older than everybody in my class. So a year older and the shortest kid in the class all the time. Uh, so I just had a lot of vinegar and piss that I needed to get out. And so, I mean, probably something I skipped over a little bit was because I was pretty angry growing up, I just picked fights with everybody. I mean, I just, and usually the fights I picked with was, I kind of followed what my dad taught me because I really didn't like getting picked on for being short. I was really, really edgy about that stuff when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And, so my dad told me, what you do is you just pick the biggest guy in the room and you get after him first. And once you've knocked him down, everybody else is going to leave you alone.
The jail
And
cell advice. That's the first thing you do when you go into jail.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
That,
yeah, yeah,
my dad being a cop, this
yeah.
was, and he was a short guy too. So this is what he said worked for him. This was kind of his advice. Yeah, Mela says Napoleon complex type
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
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 yeah.
totally. I was just angry, and
Well,
so I,
it's funny because, sorry to interrupt you there. I was always the shortest kid in the class
uh,
too, but I was the youngest. I was the
okay,
youngest kid. So
yeah,
it's funny getting the short guy, but the oldest perspective because it is
uh,
a bit different. It is a bit different. It is a bit different.
yeah, yeah. So uh, I remember, by the time I was in fifth grade, I took my dad's advice and I picked the biggest kid who was like shoving me into lockers all the
Yeah,
time
yeah.
and, just messing with me. I remember once we were playing, pardon the words for any sensitive ears out there, but there was a game we used to play before school. We'd all show up early on the field and play Smear the Queer. And,
I've never heard this.
no,
Okay, no,
it's
no.
just taking a. All it is somebody takes the football and you throw for a long yard pass, super high, and then everybody else is on the other side of the field, and whoever catches it
Yeah.
has to catch it and run. And if he doesn't get tackled, or wherever he gets tackled, he gets tackled from what I remember, and then and if the ball gets stripped away from him, then whoever strips it gets to throw the ball. But if he doesn't get the ball stripped away from him, then he gets to throw it, and that's all you're doing is just throwing a ball and tackling each other. And so that's what we called it, Smear the Queer. And
That's a good one. Okay.
I
Yeah.
remember I had a kid land on it. It was my buddy Russell, and he landed on the back of my arm when my hand planted like this, and my fingers went all the way back to my arm. And I watched it happen, and I felt this pop, and I'm like, "Oh my god!" And so I went home early that day, uh, and I went to my grandparents' house, and they took me to the doctors, and they bandaged it all up. My grandpa said, "Don't worry, it ain't broken." He's a tough guy, and so he bandaged it up for me, put some ice on it, and made me like a soft splint for the next
Mhm.
day to go to school. And then I put a bandana on with this soft splint that Grandpa had given me,
Yeah, yeah.
and took some ibuprofen in the morning. Went to school like that. And this bully kid, this big kid, he was shoving me into lockers again, and he shoved me. And when he did it, he shoved my hand, and it just hurt so bad. And I vowed that day, I was like, "You're
Mm,
mine. I'm
mm,
gonna kill this kid."
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. I've been
so
there.
he continued to pick on me throughout the year, and I remember it was like one of the last days of the week of the year, and my sister and I are walking to school, and I'm pumping myself up and just talking about it and getting angrier and angrier as I'm talking about it. And she's like, "Don't do it, John." She's my little sister. She's like, "Don't do it, John. It's not going to be good. Don't do it. You can't do it. You're going to get in trouble. Mom and Dad are going to kill you if you beat this kid up." I'm like, "I'm going to do it." And I get to school and I see him and he's across the field, and I just start running and running and running at him. I'm in fifth grade, and I'm this little kid running across the field, and I jumped on his back. He didn't see me coming. I jumped on his back and I just hugged him and started choking him and choking him and choking him.
Yeah, I can
And we
imagine it.
fall to the ground, and I just won't let go. And eventually I got on top. And when I got on top, I just kept holding him until his face went purple. And then some teachers knocked me off. They tackled me.
Okay.
Me into the principal's office, and well, that was back when corporal punishment was still allowed. So I
Yeah.
got myself a paddling that day.
Whoa,
And
really?
oh
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
That
know,
was
right? Yeah,
that was
orange.
definitely not allowed where I came from for sure.
Yeah, there was that paddle had a lot of air holes in it, make it faster, and
Ooh, okay, okay. Okay.
from that point on, the rest of being in that school, I was in trouble a lot. Like I was in trouble a lot. The principal had a thing for me after that, and I was getting into a lot of trouble. So but that kid never, he never messed with me again,
Yeah, that's the thing.
and
That's the
neither did
thing.
anybody else after that.
That's the thing. When you do something like that, it ends it.
Yeah, but
Um,
the problem is, it turned me into a bully. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
felt a lot of power that day,
yeah.
and I realized that I was pretty capable of protecting myself. And so, yeah, from that point on, I looked for kids to pick on. I totally reversed the role.
Is
And
it like are a lot of these types of like because you've mentioned a couple things that someone would identify as like I don't like traumatic experiences or like horrible things. I mentioned is this what kind of led you towards the path of addiction and kind of going down that spiral pathway? And like how did you get to that point in your life?
yeah, so like I said, I kind of dabbled in drugs starting at 13. What I was going to get to is I'll jump on that in a second.
Sure, sure.
So 14, stepdad came into the picture, and he was pretty cool. I didn't like having a stepdad.
Hmm.
It just meant one more person to tell me what to do. But he gave me a really good suggestion, which was over a summer to go to if I start working out, go to this Marine Corps base. He was a Marine, so
Okay.
he had access to the base, and he's like, if you come with me on the weekends, we can go and work out with the Marines over there and do the obstacle courses and stuff like that. They're pretty fun. Just give it a try, and if you like it enough, then we can enroll you into what's called Devil Pups program, which is basically you actually go to do Marine Corps boot camp training for a couple of weeks on a Marine Corps base, and so that was an incredible experience. Um, I loved it. I loved it. I mean, afterwards, I was like, sign me up. I want to be a Marine. Um, we did incredible things. I hope that program's still going on because it really
Yeah.
played an impact. A lot of the kids, I would say, or part of the kids there were court ordered, and
Okay.
and then some were volunteers. Most of them came from military families and stuff. And but you go and you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You're making your bed, and then you're out doing PT for a couple of hours, and then you're doing all kinds of team drills and training, and then they show you things like take you out to the field where the Marines are chucking grenades or where the tanks are being fired, and
That's
then they
cool,
take
man.
yeah, they take you out to a pool where they've got a bunch of towers at different levels, which is supposed to simulate jumping off the edge of a ship into water. And so you're jumping off really high towers. I mean, a lot of it's just like courage based and endurance based, like mental endurance. And I loved it, ate it up. And by the time I was done with those couple of weeks, I was getting some high praises. I watched kids drop out. I watched kids getting screamed at, by full grown men right in their faces, with their brim of their hat poking them in the forehead,
Yep.
and watch kids break. And I just didn't want to be that kid. So it was a good experience for me. I really needed it. And it opened up my world to that there was other possibilities for my life. And
Hmm.
it actually started to make me think about my future. And I don't think I ever had really thought about where I was going until that
Okay.
moment. But
Okay.
those guys actually asked me those kinds of questions. Those
Of course.
Marines,
Yeah.
the sergeants, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you're trying to do with your life?
Hmm.
And if you want to do that, then you know that you're going to need what you're going to get out of this next experience that we're going to put you through.
Right.
So, um, yeah, really good coaching. Um, and I mean, a lot of masculine men, just doing what dudes like to do,
Hmm.
and that's push their limits, right? And do it as a team, like encourage each other. And I didn't really have brothers growing up, so for me that was a whole other world, and I loved it. So when I got out, I felt like, okay, I'm going to, this is going to be my life. I'm going to go be a Marine. I'm going to sign up when I'm 17 and a half. And but this dabbling in drugs thing just kept coming up, and so it didn't for a short amount of time. It kind of went away after I got out of Devil Pups. I wasn't hanging out with the same friends. I wasn't really hanging out with anybody anymore. I was just working out a lot
Okay.
and having a lot of fun doing that, pushing myself, getting more invested in school. But my mom and my stepdad and we just didn't see eye to eye. I wanted to be out of their house. And so I pushed them, like really pushed them, pushed their buttons until my mom didn't really know what to do. So she sent me to my dad. And that was exactly what I wanted to happen.
Okay.
So dad, by this
How old were you at that point?
15.
15. Okay.
Yeah. So I had just finished ninth grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm 15 and it's the summer and I'm going to go be with my dad. And, they were so frustrated with me, my mom and my stepdad, that they said, put everything into this trash bag. And I put all my stuff into this trash bag. They tied it up, threw it in the back of the car. And then stepdad just literally dropped me off with my trash bag at my dad's house. And,
Ooh, that's intense.
yeah, so,
Okay.
so I stayed with my dad. My dad was remarried, and he was remarried to a woman who had been previously married like four other times. She had two children from two different fathers. Both of them were into a lot of trouble, and I won't bring up their stuff, but suffice it to say that life at Dad's house was out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Mm.
I was suddenly surrounded by everything from like as many different kinds of narcotics as you can imagine to uh, man, I mean, just gangs, skinheads, Nazi skinheads, and just all of this was like suddenly a part of my life.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
yeah, that's intense.
and I fell in with like the skater kids, and the skater kids have blended with like graffiti kids and stoner kids, and so I'm 15 and a half, getting into this new high school and finding out where I was, where I was gonna fit in. But where I fit in, all of these kids, their own little subgroups, they all blended together.
Yeah, for sure.
There wasn't as much separation as there was in Orange County. The
Okay.
gangbangers were going to be seen down at the park
Mm-hmm.
during lunch hour off of the high school campus at the same places where the stoner kids hang out and the skater kids hang out and the graffiti guys. And the Nazi skinheads would show up sometimes and just pick a fight. Then suddenly there'd be a fight off campus. And there was cops presence all over the place at these high schools. It was like all of a sudden I'm in Los Angeles County School District, and in the 90s, and so it was intense. It was a lot less safe. All the rails were off, and the world was definitely like open up to me again. I had a lot of freedom, and I did. I got into as much possible trouble as I could. And mainly it was just guilty by association. Like I would just fall in with a crowd, see if this was the crowd I was going to hang with. I liked one or two people within that group. And if they were getting into trouble, then so was I, because I wanted to fit in.
Of course.
And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so, yeah, so that meant that like, by the time I was 16, I was like heavily using methamphetamine and smoking a lot of weed and drinking every weekend and getting into less fights. But when I did get into fights, they were a lot more intense.
Oh,
And that was a lot of that had to do with the fact that I loved doing art. Like I said, I'd always been into art. I'd always been an artist, and so I got into learning how to do graffiti with some graffiti kids, and that meant that the gangbangers didn't really like the graffiti kids, and I got blamed for I don't know, crossing out some tags or something like that were gang tags. And so suddenly I had a bunch of 18th Street kids that were showing up on campus. Some of them were not even in high school anymore. I was being threatened with a gun. Um, I was being jumped, sometimes on campus, sometimes on the way home from school. Just dudes would just pile out of a car and just beat me up. I'd go home and tell my dad about it. My dad was like, you know, handle it. Like he,
yeah, 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 yeah,
just
yeah.
whatever, handle it. And so I thought about how my best way to handle it would be, and got myself into some trouble and kicked out of school with a felony, and then ended up going to a continuation school the next year. Only was in it for a few months, and by the time I was 17, I was like, "All right, Dad, this isn't working." So I told my dad I was going to leave, and my plan in the back of my mind, that he didn't really ask what it was, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, I'm going to go sell drugs and live on the streets, and that's better than living here.
Okay.
And so I told him, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm leaving." He says, "All right, like for good?" I said, "Yeah, like, I mean, I'll see you around, but it's going to be for good." And so here we are standing out in front of his house having this kind of, man to man conversation. And he understood, like, it's kind of weird because I've talked about this with him recently. It's kind of funny. But he just reached into his wallet, gave me $20 and said, "Good luck," and gave me a handshake.
Wow.
And so there I was, 17 years old, like there wasn't a talk of like, "Hey, slow down," like, "Hey kid, whatever you're
Yeah.
doing, this is a good idea," which honestly is what I needed. That's
Okay.
what I needed
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
moment. But he was not that type of dad.
Right.
He didn't
Right.
have that kind of mentorship from his father when he was a kid, and so he didn't know how to give that to me. So I don't fault him for it, but that's just the way it was. I actually called him about it a year ago and was like, "Hey, do you remember that time, like when I left your house, and like, what's up with that? Like, you didn't try to stop me.
Mm.
You didn't tell me I was going down a wrong
Mm.
path.
Mm. Yep.
Um, you know, you knew that I was interested in the military. Like, why didn't you push me in that direction?" And he's like, "I just figured you're 17 years old. I figured you knew what you were doing. When I was
Mm.
17, I enlisted into the Navy. I knew exactly what I wanted in life, and I went for it. So I figured you were kind of the same."
Mm. Yeah.
And I told him, "No, I needed some direction."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but lesson learned. Here I am. I'm a father. I've got teenagers, and so lesson learned, right?
It's also that generation at that time,
Oh
in
yeah,
that particular time in history, there was like a big gap between the way our parents thought and we thought at that time, especially
yeah,
with like the types of environments you grew up in. Because I knew some guys that grew up in similar environments to yours, and
yeah,
it was very similar type of story. It's kind of
yeah.
like 18, you got to get out, kid. Or even like I remember parents be like, "Okay, you're 18 now, you got to go,"
Oh
things
yeah,
like that.
yeah. All my
So
friends were kicked out when they were 18.
yeah, which is like very different than how I was raised. So like I've seen it and I get it, especially at that time. Like
Hmm.
you said, divorce was rampant.
Yep.
A lot of those older guys, they were raised totally different by different dads. So yeah, I
Yep.
get it. I get it.
Yeah. I think military families too.
True, true.
Like there's this kind of mentality. If you've grown up, like, you don't show emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if there's a big change coming down the pipe, like, you don't ask for help. You
Mm-hmm.
just handle your business,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that's what my dad, assumed I was doing. And so, but what I was doing, my real intentions was, I'm going to go on the streets and couch surf, and I'm going to sell drugs for a living,
Mm.
and I'm going to be a baller, and that's how I'm going to get by.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so but my addiction was already like, I was not seeing the forest from the trees.
Okay.
I was in the middle of a pretty heavy addiction, and I wasn't aware of it.
What was
So,
your predominant addiction to?
it was crystal meth.
Oh, okay. Well, seriously.
Yeah. And so I wanted to move up the chain, and I started to get connected to people who, sold bigger and bigger amounts. And,
Mm.
um, but I was a weaselly little kid, man. Still, I was not, I was not able, people could look at me and I'm sure they saw, like, this is not a dude who can handle his business.
Mm.
I
Yep.
was young and naive.
Yep.
And I burned people all the time because of it. I mean, that was my main goal, was I was out for me. And over the next couple of years, homelessness, like, plays a real toll on your mind.
Mm.
Everything is unstable. Everything's
For sure.
insecure.
Yep.
You don't know where you're staying from one night to the next. Your whole focus is, like, on two things when you're trying to survive like that, is it's on, what are you going to eat and where are you going to sleep. And
Yeah.
if you're doing meth, well, you've already taken one of those problems out. You don't have to worry about when you're going to eat. Um, and so really, it's kind of a solution. It's a terrible solution, but it was a solution to a problem, to one of the big problems that you face when you're homeless.
Mm.
So being addicted to meth was kind of served its purpose of being able to take care of one of those big problems, and then the other one was where you're going to sleep well. Guess what? You don't sleep either when you're on meth. So if you don't have a place to sleep that night, that's okay. You can just walk around, visit people, sell drugs, whatever you're doing, and by the time morning comes around, all right, it's warmed up and you're still going.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So a few things, a variety of things happened during that time. I started to sell a variety of different drugs. I just kind of became a toxic waste dump for whatever crossed my path, and that was everything. I mean, there wasn't a drug I wouldn't try, and there wasn't a drug that I probably didn't try at the time. And I ran into folks who had been doing it a lot longer than me. They were in their 30s and 40s, and those were the people that I liked hanging out with the most. And a few of them kind of took me under their wing, and that a lot of them were connected to a lot heavier weight of drugs. And so for me, it just kind of seemed natural that that's where I would fall in line with everything. And
Wait, so you were looking at it almost like a career path?
yeah,
Like I'm going to
yeah,
go to the next level. Wow.
right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
For me, it was like this is actually what I'm going to do with my life, right?
Okay.
And so I became a mule. So that which just meant I would throw whatever weight they were going to put into my backpack, and I would walk it from one side of town to the other. And because I was a young kid, like I didn't get stopped by cops. I could just hop on my skateboard and ride with a backpack to the other side of town and deliver whatever I was delivering.
Okay.
And that meant that the people I was, spending time hanging out with were, pretty dangerous folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually liked that. I think I was attracted to the danger of it,
Yeah, for sure.
but I was totally out of my depth. Like I was ignorant and naive enough to know to not know this, but I was looking back on it now. I can say I was totally out of my depth with the things that I was doing.
Well,
And
thank God
so,
nothing happened, man. Thank God, man. Because
yeah,
that
thank God I'm
a
alive.
lot could have happened.
Yeah. I had I mean, I OD'd a couple of times. I had guns pointed in my face, shot into, walls and ceilings near me by crazy people. I saw a lot of psychosis. Uh, I was kind of always like, when is it going to finally happen to me? Because there's just things that that you're not in control of when you're in your addiction.
Yep.
It's funny because a lot of the drug addicts that I met are some of the smartest people I've ever met. They're just incredibly intuitively intelligent, emotionally intelligent people who are just completely caught up in their own addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And but they're aware of it. They're totally aware of it.
Yep.
And they know that the decisions that they're making are why they're making those decisions. So in and out of trying to get clean a couple of times. I ended up in a rehab. My parents, that I asked them for help, and then dropped out of rehab and went back out on the streets. And then eventually, I had an experience where I had stayed up for an 18-day stretch, and which you can't do that unless you have a lot of drugs around. But I stayed up for 18-day stretch, and then I finally passed out. When I passed out, I passed out in a squat, like an old rundown apartment that a bunch of tweakers had taken over. And I woke up 3 days later, and when I woke up, I was miserable. I was sober, and I realized the state of my life. And that was the first time that I actually begged God to just do something with me. Mm-hmm. I had been aware that He was in my life. Mm-hmm. I had been aware that God was watching me the entire time. Mm-hmm. And I had been aware that when I was a young kid and I started dabbling in all this stuff, that I had made a conscious decision to test God to see if He was real.
Okay.
So, probably 12, 13 years old, here I am making these decisions. For me, I chose the path, really consciously chose the direction that I went. So by the time I'm 19, I'm looking back on the series of decisions that started back then when I was a kid, um, as just a series of conscious decisions to make to continually put me in direction that I was going to test God to see if he was actually real. Because if God is love, in my reasoning, I was thinking, if God is love and he is real, then he'll stop me before I get to the point of death. But if he's not real, then none of this matters anyway.
Mm.
And
Yep. Yep.
I can do whatever I want until I completely run riot and kill myself doing it, and I'll have had a lot of fun in the meantime.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it was a very, very conscious decision to make.
That's that's
Uh,
dark.
it was
Yeah.
very secret too. Like I could not have put it into words. It wasn't something I ever told anybody about. There was a commercial for Dare in the 80s.
Oh my. Yeah. 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 I remember
And
Dare. I remember
there was
Dare.
some that were like, here's your brain, and it's a
Yeah.
frying pan, and
Yeah.
they crack
Yeah.
the egg, and
It's your
your
brain
brain on
on
drugs. But there
drugs.
was
Yeah.
one in particular of those commercials that I was a kid watching, and it was this teenager, and he's running, and then you see why he's running, which is some cops are chasing him,
Oh, I think I
and
remember this one. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
at the end it just the screen goes
Yeah.
black and the
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
up on the screen in white, and it says, nobody ever says I want to be a junkie when I
Yeah.
grow up.
Yeah. I remember that.
And I remember watching that commercial and thinking to myself, but I do.
Yeah.
And that was the decision I was actually making, was that commercial was an image of what I was doing with my life consciously.
Mm. Okay.
And
Yep.
so I went down this path. And by the time I'm 19, I'm looking at the state of my life, and I'm realizing, like, he's been there the entire time watching me, but hanging back, letting me make the decisions, and it's led me to this. And I'm about to make. I know that I can see clearly that the next several decisions that I make are going to take me to a place in my life that I'm really going to have a hard time with in my conscience, and I don't know if I can live with myself if I continue down this path.
Oh, I see. I see.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that it was going to lead to prison or jail
Hmm.
or something worse, and
For sure.
and there are worse things than prison, jail, and death.
Yeah.
There are things in this life. I pray that not many people understand that from the intimate level that I do, but there are things in this life that you can do to yourself that are so depraved to survive
Hmm.
that people can be pushed to those decisions pretty easily based on their addiction and their life situation, with almost without their control. And
The movie Basketball, movie Basketball
Basketball Diaries,
Diaries really shows a lot of what you're talking about right there.
perfect example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I knew that that's where my life was at that point, and was going to continue to go down.
For sure. For sure.
Um, and I had, like I said, I'd OD'd a couple of times. An 18-day stretch on methamphetamine and then crashing for 3 days, I probably was pretty close to death at that point. Um,
Mm. Yeah.
I saw a lot of, while I was homeless, I saw a lot of demonic stuff happen around me.
Yep.
When you're in the underworld, and when you're up late at night on those kind of drugs, you see things that other people don't see. And I'm convinced to this day that those things are real, and they drive
Yep.
people crazy.
Yep. Yep.
And I knew personally, I had a lot of crazy people in my life. Like, I mean, certifiably psychotic people in my life at that point, and very, very dangerous people. And I was putting myself in a lot of increasingly dangerous situations, with like bikers and gang members, and
Mm.
burning people that, like, I really had no business doing. And so I realized at that moment when I woke up that I was going to, uh, I was that I actually had people that were going to kill me because I had done some things that I deserved it, and they were out looking for me.
Hmm.
And so I got. I knew I had like one more chance, if anything. If I was going to survive what was coming down the road for me, I needed to just call mom one more time and say, I know I've done this before with you, but can you just let me in? And I hope that I can you know, show you that I need to get clean and sober. And she answered the phone and picked me up. She drove an hour and a half up to pick me up. By this point, I didn't have a backpack. I didn't have shoes. I just had my jeans and a t-shirt, and that was it. And so yeah, and I had a quarter in my pocket. That
Wow.
was
Okay.
one quarter in my pocket, and I used a payphone with that quarter to call my mom. So like literally, I had nothing left except for one out, and that
Wow.
one out was that quarter in my pocket to call my mom and
Okay.
ask her to come. And so I saw God giving me an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
after praying to Him and asking Him for help,
Mm-hmm.
and He
Mm-hmm.
did. And so I called her, and she said, "Okay, this is the last chance." And this woman, I had stolen from her. I'd broken her heart. This is, the kid she raised, and the baby that she nursed. And here he is, calling her up and saying, "I know I've burned you. I know I've done a lot of bad things, but just please take me this one last time."
Okay.
And
Okay.
so for her, she said, "Okay, I'll do it." And when I got to stepdad and mom's house, stepdad said, "Here's your list of rules." Um, so I had to, brush my teeth 3 times a day after every meal. I had a set sleeping schedule. I had to take a shower, twice a day.
Wow, that detailed, eh? Wow.
Yeah, I had to detox, which took me about 3 weeks to detox. And like my sister lived at the house. I didn't even remember that my sister lived here till recently, where I was talking to her about this. But she said, "Oh yeah, I was there." Um, but I lived at my parents' house while I went to Narcotics Anonymous meetings and got sober, and you know, uh, just continued to I was working out a lot. I was doing push-ups. They bought me a punching bag. They asked me, "Is there anything you want for Christmas?" I said, "I need a punching bag."
Mm. Good
And
call. Good call.
yeah, and I just got into fitness and working out and just getting out the anger and sweating out the chemicals, and stunk up the house for a few weeks and went to a lot of meetings. Got a sponsor, which is something you do in a 12-step program. And my sponsor had like 20 years clean and sober. Um, Crazy thing was, it's interesting. By the time I had completed my 12 steps the first year that I was in the program, which a lot of people don't do in their first year, but I was like, I'm this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things happened though. One was, the Lord completely took away every urge for me to want to go back and do it again.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
pretty big miracle. I never
Yeah.
had an urge to do drugs after that.
Good for
Um,
you, man.
and No, like not to do meth or anything. Like not an urge.
Mm.
The,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the addictive nature had been like dissipated
Glory
somehow.
to God. Glory to God.
Yeah, and but I still had a lot of anger. I still had a lot of bad behavior. I still lied a lot. And But I did my first 12 steps in the first year. And then my sponsor actually went back out to the streets and started slamming heroin again. And
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
um, yeah, and I like he and I were friends, but suddenly he just, I don't know, he dropped off the rails, and he went back to exactly what he used to do before, which was live under a bridge, drink Milwaukee's best beer, and slam heroin. And he
Mm-hmm.
lost everything in like a month.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I didn't have a sponsor anymore, and I was moving out of my parents' house. And so I started, I had some friends again. I was hanging out in the hardcore scene, trying to stay clean, being straight edge, going to punk shows. I needed a subculture to hang out with, people to hang out with that were my own age, um, and people that were focused at least on not doing things. And within the straight edge scene, there's at least like a moralism among the culture.
True.
And so that was better than nothing. I didn't really have a church to go to or faith yet in God. I was still pretty self-serving, narcissistic, and self-seeking for experiences. But I needed something as a control to uh, to just focus my life in some ways. And
Yep.
so for me, going to punk shows was a way to kind of blow off steam. As long as they were hardcore shows and hanging out with straight edge friends, then I could kind of keep on the straight and narrow track for a while. But I got into body piercing,
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was, like 19 uh, years old to 20 years old. I was learning how to body pierce, and I created a portfolio for myself. And then I brought the portfolio to a tattoo shop that was a really big in Orange County. They were like a really big body piercing shop right next door that was owned by the tattoo shop, and they were super busy, popular place. I won't mention the name, but because I don't know if they're still around anymore. But I went there and gave them my portfolio, and they were like, "Oh, okay, we can work with this. We'll train you for 3 months, and if you're good and you don't make any mistakes, like we have another shop over in Placentia Fullerton area, and we'll put you in that shop because we want to build up some piercing business over there." And man, I was on point with that. So um, we did it, and it worked out that way. And all of a sudden, I'm the head body piercer at a tattoo shop, um, and I'm making money. I'm working like 4 days a week and coming home with about 400 to 600 bucks every night. By the time a year had passed,
Oh yeah,
um,
that's money for sure.
that was money. Being 20 years old to make that kind of money, there wasn't a lot of people my age doing that. And but so anyway, the scene, the rave scene by this point was getting pretty big. Um, there was a lot of crossover between genres and subcultures at this point,
Super
where
true. Super true.
hardcore kids are going to raves as well and listening to techno music, and raver kids are going to hardcore shows, and so I started to meet some kids and got invited to a couple of raves in Los Angeles and Orange County, and before you know it, like we're going out to the big ones in the desert by the big art communities that are putting on huge raves, and up in the Los Angeles Crest Mountains. And so yeah, I was getting involved with all of that, and that got me into drugs, but into different kinds. So I ended up falling into using psychedelics, and a lot of ecstasy, and the main ones that I was involved with was like, okay, well, I know I can sell drugs, so I'm going to sell ecstasy while I'm also body piercing. And so I body pierced for about 4 years.
Did you have any hesitation there like because of your previous addictions? Like were you like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
okay.
I was hesitant, but honestly, I wasn't thinking clearly, and I don't think I really had the right direction going
Right.
on.
Right. For sure. Yeah, yeah.
And also, I hooked up with a girl. I'm not gonna blame her, but I had a girlfriend who was a raver chick, and she was super into metaphysics and
Yeah.
Eastern mysticisms and
Mhm.
meditation. I mean, this was a girl who would like lay on the ground and meditate for hours with crystals around her, or go to seminars
Mhm.
up
Mhm.
in Ojai, California, and or out in the Pacific Palisades. And and I was just kind of along for the ride, because all of this stuff was interesting and new to me. And yeah, drugs were just around, and so doing psychedelics, I didn't ever think that they were addictive.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
at least back then, my opinion wasn't that they were addictive. So for me, jumping into them, I was dumb, honestly. Like, let's just be
Hey,
honest, I was
no,
dumb.
me too. I get
Yeah,
it.
and
I get it.
yeah, and so I made the mistake of falling into those. Now, I will say this is that although I got into psychedelics and into selling psychedelics quite a lot at the time, that I did not get addicted, thank God. He really had taken that addictive, that part of my personality, and kind of like protected me in some way. And I can't completely explain it. Yeah, I mean, but for whatever reason, I never lost myself the way I had when I was younger again. So then, yeah, I'm only 20 something, 20 to 21 years old, and I'm living in Huntington Beach, California. And I'm going through, working at some of the best shops in Orange County. As I had a couple of spots that I worked at, so I could work where I was at one shop 2 nights a week, and then another shop another night a week, and then a third shop another night a week to cover another body piercer because he was out of town or something like that. And then I was being asked by friends up in the Bay Area if I could come and visit their shops sometimes.
Mhm.
And so I would do these traveling trips up to like Oakland and Berkeley, and go visit my friends up at shops up there. And I built a name for myself. So in like 4 years, as a body piercer, I had other piercers from other parts of the state that were sending me clients to do work that they weren't willing to do because it was risky or whatever. And but I got burnt out pretty quick. I loved visiting the Bay Area. That part I didn't get burnt out on. I did go to, like, I went up. I was still in the punk rock scene. I was going to Gilman Street sometimes. I was, going to hardcore shows up there. I was, visiting a lot of friends that were straight edge kids and punk kids up in the Bay Area, and at the same time, I'm going to raves and I'm also going to reggae concerts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend of mine who was a Rasta, and like he was legit. Like this dude read his Bible every day. He prayed, and he smoked a lot of weed. And he went to reggae shows, and he knew actual Jamaicans that taught him Rastafarianism. And so we became really close. His name was Maya, and Maya was a tattoo artist at this super popular tattoo shop that I was working at, and he got me a job to kind of be a stand-in for their main body piercer. And so when stand-in body piercer was out of town, which he did a lot of traveling, then I would kind of fill in for him. And Maya and I got to be real close, and he got me into reading the Bible. We would just sit up all night talking, reading the Bible, smoking weed, and listening to reggae music. And I was really attracted to the lifestyle. There were certain parts of it that really kind of jived with me. By this point, I'm already a vegan and vegetarian and going to animal rights protests. But at the same time, I'm like coming home at night and reading my Bible and trying to meditate and pray to God, who I knew God more on, I think on a more intimate level than a lot of people around me did, because I know that he had personally saved me from myself in my addiction.
For sure.
And so there was something about him that I knew that he loved me and that he was real in a way that I think a lot of people kind of rationalize in their mind that he's real, but don't really have an experience to kind of connect it to.
True.
And so, and I had a few. So I went to this like, I went to a couple of reggae shows. I went to a lot of, I went to a lot of reggae shows. Pretty much every weekend or any free day. And I had, like I was making good money. So any free day I wanted, I could take, and I could just go on trips to go to raves or music festivals or whatever. Or go to a new age seminar, somewhere for a weekend or something like that, and drop a bunch of money. I had this experience where I was meditating, and I went inside myself, and this experience like kind of gave me a little insight into something that kind of made an impact on me, which was that inside myself, I noticed that at the depths of who I am, which is mankind, who I am, is this empty cup, but it's filled with all the things that we're constantly putting in it that are making it dirty on the inside. But we're just this empty cup. And I don't have any control over how to get that dirty stuff out of the cup on my own. But that empty cup is supposed to be filled with God, with the actual divine. And that if it is filled with the divine, I had this realization that if it is filled with the divine, that is actually who mankind is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Is this vessel that's filled with divinity and grace. And that was, the heights of anything I'd experienced in meditation before, was to like have this like real inpouring of experiential, outside of myself revelation that was being given to me, that actually did something to me. It broke something in me and humbled me to realize like how out of control I am of my own experience currently, but it's because of all of the stuff that I've been filling myself with that I'm out of control. And that if I can learn how to give of myself back to my creator, to God, if I can give it back to him, then he'll remove all of that filth and remove all the stuff that I'm attached to, and then fill me with himself. And then I can become who I'm actually supposed to be. So then the question out of that I came out of that revelation with was, well, then I need to know who God actually is, like who personally, who he is, that he is a personality that I can interact with and meet, but I need to know who specifically he is. And here I am reading the scriptures, and I started to read the Gospel of John, and I realized that the man who said, the only person who's ever existed who said that he was God,
Yep.
is the same one that every other religion has a problem with him saying he's God,
Yep. So true.
and that's Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Um, and so something broke in me when I realized that. And I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be out of control anymore. I didn't want to be out of control of all of these bad habits and patterns. And I was just reactionary. I was a passionate, beastly being that didn't have any control over anything in his life, and everything had been a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And that a lie that I've been telling myself. So I remember pretty vividly that it was like a little after Bob Marley's birthday. I went to a big reggae festival up in Northern California, and I met a cat, and his name was Rain, and uh, he was a glass blower. And I was looking for an out at this point, out of the body piercing scene. I didn't want to really be a part of it. God was cleansing me and putting it on my conscience that I needed to like remove things from my life. And the first thing I needed to remove from my life was this career in piercing.
Mm-hmm.
There was something unpleasing about it
Mm-hmm.
to God.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it in my heart. My conscience was bugging me about it. And so I'm at this reggae show, and I'm talking to this cat, this glass blowing cat, and he's like, "Hey, if you come up and visit me up in Oregon, I'll teach you how to blow glass." And I'm like, "Dude, sign me up." I literally within a month, like a month or two, got rid of everything that would have hindered me from going up there, and I talked my girlfriend into it. And we both went up, and we decided to go live in a cabin and then yurts in the woods in Southern Oregon, and I'm living kind of my best life up until that point. Like this was an incredible several years of just living out in the woods. I didn't have a TV. Um, I had left Babylon behind. This is like 1998 at this point, and or maybe late 1998, early 1999, and we all know that like 2000s coming, Y2K is going to happen.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
there's Mayan pole shifts,
Oh
or
yeah.
Mayan calendar's going to change, and the pole shifts are going to happen, and all of this stuff that we're starting to believe in because of New Ageism is, and all of this is going to culminate in the year 2000. And so I was like, okay, I gotta go. Like I have to go. So this was my way of like convincing myself to like leave everything behind, go up to the forest and go live in the forest and just like get out of Babylon,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I was growing my dreads. I was living a vegan, vegetarian lifestyle, and I just got more and more strict with prayer and scripture reading while learning how to blow glass from my friend. And we built a glass blowing shop. We had a guy come out and fall a tree, and and then we had a hippie dude who was a construction guy, and he taught us how to build this thing, and we built it all together and built a glass blowing shop, like an 18 feet diameter glass blowing shop.
Oh, that's cool. That's
And
cool.
yeah, out in the woods.
That's cool.
In a town of about 1,000 people, most of which are either families that used to live up there when the mill was still working, and they were lumber families, or they were hippies that had moved up there in the '60s and raised families up there on communes. And so there's only about 1,000 people in that town called Williams. And so we lived there for a few years together. But as I started to continue to pray and to read scripture and to remove bad habits from my life, as God gave me the strength to do it, then I kind of got to this point where I needed to get out of the unhealthy relationship that I was in as well. and that was weighing on my heart, was that I was in this unhealthy relationship, where I was not in wedlock, and we had no commitment to each other, not really, and there wasn't ever going to be one. And it was just this other part of my life that was in a state of limbo that I had to remove. And so at the time, I had come across, this other question about being a Rastafarian, which I was starting to take pretty seriously. And for me to fully commit to it, I needed to get to the bottom of an answer, which was who was Haile Selassie. Because in the Rasta community, Haile Selassie, the last king of Ethiopia, is to a lot of Rastas, not all of them, because there's disagreement among the houses, but to a lot of them, he's like the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I needed.
What type of Rastafarianism were you into? Because the other thing with Rastafarianism is it's so vague and like nebulous in many ways that when you talk to like a bunch of different people, you're gonna get a bunch of different answers. Especially when you
Yep.
talk to non-real Jamaicans,
Yep.
and even the ones. And I also found that many real Jamaicans are lying. So
Yeah.
when I met like actual Jamaicans from Jamaica, or I really started looking into it, like there's really just three.
Yep.
Really. There's the
Yep.
Nyabingi, 12 Tribes, and Bobo, the
Yep.
Bobo Ashanti dreads.
Yeah. So I met a cat who came and stayed with me. He was on his way up to Vancouver to a Rasta community up there in British Columbia, and he stopped at my house for a week. And he was from Bobo Shanty House,
Okay.
and
Yeah, that's big
and
time.
so I asked him about the differences, and to kind of figure out like where I was aligned, right? And and he said, like, I kind of came to the, after many conversations of us reasoning together, like one of the things that I came to was I'm probably more aligned with Nyabingi
Yeah, well,
at
you're
the
also
time.
white, so you kind of can't be a Bobo.
Can't be a Bobo.
Yeah.
And Nyabingi House is much more new agey.
Yeah. Yeah, very so, yeah.
And so, I mean, they say there's 12 tribes, but you're right. There's only like three. So,
Yeah.
um, and so I was kind of Nyabingi, but I had but Nyabingi doesn't like ascribe to like a lot of Christianity, a lot of Christian views.
Very
And
true.
so that's where I kind of, didn't exactly fit in again. Right.
Right.
So who am I? Um,
Right.
and there was a cat that was a reggae guy that was never as popular. He was a reggae musician that was never as popular as anybody else, but everybody in the Rasta community in Jamaica, they know this guy, right? They like, he's a name among them, but the white people on the West Coast don't really know who he is. His name is Yabi U.
Oh, the
And
guy with the busted up lips.
yeah,
Yeah. I know exactly who you're talking
Yabi
about.
U is a he's a Christian.
Yeah.
They call him. In fact, his first album is called Jesus Freak,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he's Yabi U is a Christian, and like he worked with King Tubby did all the dub for all of his music.
Mm-hmm.
So he was pretty well known in the industry. And Yabi was like the dude that I related to the most. And Yabi could break down the teachings of being a Christian and synthesizing that with Rastafarianism very well.
Mm-hmm.
And Yabi didn't believe that Haile Selassie was Christ. That
Yep.
he held him in high regard like a saint, but he wasn't a man. Yabi was like probably my first encounter with like listening to the teachings of a priest, because he broke down Christ, and it kind of disintegrated some of my Rastafarian beliefs
Mm-hmm.
that I think I had. But it left me with this question about who is Haile Selassie then.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm hanging out with a lot of kids that are from like the Nyabingi culture, that scene, and so I had to have an answer for why I believed, that Jesus Christ was God, was King of God, and so that meant that I had to find out about Haile Selassie. So here I am jumping on the interwebs for probably one of my first times, at a library in this town of 1,000 people. They happen to have like a one-room library,
Yeah.
and they could order books from Ashland, from the main library in Ashland, Oregon. And I jump on it, and the internet at this point is pretty much just a yellow pages with some
I
keyboard.
remember. Oh yeah.
And so I'm looking it up. to get this book called My Life and Ethiopia's Progress
Mm-hmm.
by Haile Selassie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading that book when I got it. In the meantime, I'm also researching Bob Marley because I'd heard about his funeral,
Yeah. Yep.
and I found out that he was given an Ethiopian Orthodox funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out that you can't have that unless you're baptized. And then I found out about Abuna Yashak, or Bishop Isaac,
Bishop. Yeah.
that was the bishop that Haile Selassie sent to Jamaica, or he sent to Jamaica from Ethiopia to convert the Rastas,
Mm-hmm.
and that Bob had been converted. And I found online, I found the video of Abuna Yashak talking about Bob having confession,
Yep. Yep.
and how he wept for several hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, as I completed the reading of this book, this thick, I mean, I'd never read a book so thick before. It was probably, I don't know, it was probably 500 to 800 pages or something like that. It was a big book. And Haile Selassie gives all of his thanks and praises to Jesus Christ
Yes.
and the Orthodox Church.
Yes, he does.
And he's got several miracles in there, even since his childhood, that are incredible. And I love the story of the Ethiopian Orthodox and how they came to be. And I mean, you go back to Philip, in Acts, you find the apostles, speaking with Ethiopians.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I discovered this thing called the Orthodox Church and I didn't know any differences between Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox or any of that yet. I was totally ignorant to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I found something that I had never heard of before called orthodoxy.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed, from that point on, I needed to encounter it, like physically. And so I, it's crazy. At the time, I'm trying to break up with my girlfriend. And so I said, you know what? I got to go up to Washington. I've got family up there. My grandmother lives there. I'm going to go visit her. And I'm not telling her about what I'm doing. I'm just like, I'm going to go up visit my grandma. And so I hitched her right into town. And girlfriend said, okay, well, that's fine. I'm going to leave and go to California probably to go visit my family. We need to break up from each other anyway and get away from each other for a little bit. We were fighting a lot. And our relationship was incredibly unhealthy. And so I went to Washington, to Seattle, and I looked for an Orthodox church up there. And I walked around all day. I got off the bus. I walked around all day. I got myself some coffee. I didn't bring enough money for food. I had just enough money to get back on the bus and get back to Grandma's house in Bothell. And I looked for this church all day long up in the district where I knew it was. I knew it was there. But I couldn't find it. It was like God had physically put some blinders on, like a spiritual blindness over me to find this church, which is I think it's called Saint Michael or Archangel Michael's church, and it's a really big church with hundreds of Ethiopians that go there. And I didn't find it, but I know I was in the neighborhood. And I sat down on a curb, totally disheartened, exhausted, having walked, I don't know, over 10 miles more by this point, and I was frustrated. And I sat down and I just prayed, Lord, why did you bring me all the way here? Show me this church. And I looked up and I happened to be sitting right across from a church.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck? And there's Ethiopian writing under some Latin writing and some Spanish writing. And I'm like, what is this? It was a little church. It wasn't the one that I saw a picture of online. So I know this isn't the same one.
Okay.
But there's Ge'ez written on the side of this church, which is the Ethiopian language. So I go in to this church, and it looks like a Catholic church. There's pews,
Mm-hmm.
there's statues, white marble statues of saints that are obviously Catholic. And but then there's a candle area, and above the candle area, there's some Ethiopian icons. Mm. And I'm like, what is this place? Okay, wherever I'm supposed to be here right now. And I go and I light a candle. I'd never done that before, but I light a candle. And I just sat down in a pew, and I kind of, probably 80 to 90% of me at this point is expecting that God himself is going to plant an angel next to me in the seat, or that some priest is going to walk in through the door and he's going to reveal to me this hidden understanding of the scriptures and who the church is and how it came to be and all of that. And all my problems are going to be solved. And that was my expectation. And instead, what I got was an empty church that I sat in for about 2 hours, where I wept like a baby,
Mm.
not understanding anything, because God was confounding me
Mm.
and just breaking me down further and allowing me to be humbled. And because the Lord does not come to you in the way that you want him and the way that you expect him to. He
This is
comes the
true.
way he wants to come to you.
This is true.
And and my perception of how my relationship with God was not at all what it actually is. So I did not see things clearly. And that's what I was coming to the realization of. That
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you want me to do, Lord. I felt really called and led to be here to Washington to find this church of yours. Here I am, Lord. Look at me. Come to me and show me what it is that you want. And so I prayed there for about 2 hours and nothing happened. I got up. I walked out to the bus. I waited for it. It was on the last bus. I was really lucky. And I got a ride back to grandma's house and I went home, or I went to grandma's house, and I had a dream that night that my girlfriend slept with my Rasta friend
This was a dream, though.
in a dream. And I
Okay.
woke up the next morning and I called my girlfriend and she wasn't there. So I called her aunt's house down in Southern California and I said, "Hey, where you at? Funny thing, I had this crazy dream." And she answered and she's like, that's a crazy dream. That's weird. And I got back. I took the bus ride back down to Grants Pass and then back to my yurt in Williams, where I'm living in the woods. And I still had probably a week or more before my girlfriend was going to be back. And so I tried to get back to work, do my normal thing, get into my routine, blow my glass, send my glass to my distributor, and then try to keep my mind focused on work. And I just couldn't work. I couldn't work. There was nothing I could do. All I could do, I had no energy to work.
Mm.
My mind was racing. It was only focused on one thing, which is, who is God?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who is God? Who is this church? What is this thing? And I need that, Lord. And so I couldn't work. I couldn't focus on anything else. So I walk down to the general store, like my normal routine in the morning. I get up in the morning, I go down to the general store, I walk a 5 mile walk, sit down on the front bench with a cup of coffee and watch the horses. And then about mid afternoon, walk back up to my yurt and go start blowing glass. And I'm sitting there on the bench, drinking my coffee. And I'd done this, 1,000 times in the last 4 or 5 years. And sitting there, drinking my coffee, and out comes the general store manager guy, and he sits down next to me. And my name at the time was Judah. That was like my Rastafari name or whatever. I didn't have a name anymore other than that. um, and he sits down next to me. His name is George. Just an old man, curly hair, and I'm sure everybody remembers back when hip surgeries were a lot more complicated. That what they would do is they would shorten your leg first, and they'd put this boot on your shoe
Oh
where
yeah,
you got
yeah,
a
yeah.
thicker
I remember.
sole, and you walk around like that for a few weeks, and then they would have something made that they would put into your hip that had to be customized for you, and then they would put it into your hip later on. So you had to have kind of two surgeries to get a hip surgery. So he's walking around on this boot. So he hobbles. He's a short guy, gray hair, curly beard, and he sits down next to me and he's like, "Hey man, I haven't seen you for a while. Where you been?" And I said, "Oh my God, I'm a mess. Thanks for asking." And I just pour out my heart. I just vomit up my spirit to this guy. And George just sits there quietly and listens. And when I get to the point of the story where I'm telling him about going and looking for this Orthodox church, he laughs, like a hearty laugh. And he looks at me and he's like, "Kid, didn't you know I'm an Orthodox priest?"
Really?
And and I'm like, "What?" And he, from that point on, he takes me under his wing and tells me, be here for Vespers tonight at my house. I've got a chapel in my backyard. And George and his little Japanese wife, and they're in their 60s at the time, they just took me under their wing. And every day I was there for service. And after service, George would sit out on the patio with me and say, "Okay, questions?" Or he'd hand me a spiritual book to read, and then questions. And he would just sit there for as long as I needed to pour out my heart or to answer questions for me about the church. And the crazy thing was, every question that I asked that had been on my heart at the time, that had always been kind of in my spirit to ask questions about God, I could ask. And everything about the church and the faith, I could ask. But the answers that I would get back were always, as it was like, the answer was like, oh, of course it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Mm-hmm.
course,
Yep.
truth would be something that would resonate in my heart with, that would be something that I always knew was true.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I resonated with, that there was something about the love in my heart that would reflect and understand and know the truth when I found it. And here's this old man just breaking it down for me. And him and his wife Kosako, they just took me under their wing, and they fed me, and they picked me up and put me back together. And George was really good about being firm with me about things that I needed to let go of in my life, things that I needed to stop. But he was also really good at giving me some good spiritual food. And he had a huge library. Father George speaks 7 languages,
Wow. Okay.
and he had a huge library. And I could pick any book off the library, and I could take it home and read it, and as long as I brought it back. And of course, he says, the first time he says this to me, he says, "Hey, look, I'm here to give you, whatever answers you want, I'll answer for you. But here's a caveat: is um, if you get an answer, and I'm telling you the truth, you're responsible for what you do with it."
Mm. I like
Um,
that. I like that.
that's the caveat to learning truth: is that when you learn truth, you're responsible for what you know,
It's
like
so true.
eternally responsible for
For
what you know.
sure. Absolutely.
And if you do nothing with it, that's going to be worse for you. And I was just like, yeah, sure, yeah, sign me up. So when he says, here's this library, here's my library, you can read any books, go ahead. And being the dumb young convert inquirer, I go reaching for the Philokalia.
I
What is
was
this
gonna
book?
say, yeah, for sure, everybody.
Uh, you know, he didn't slap my hand, but it wouldn't have been a surprise if he had. But he says, "Oh, hold on, hold on, hold on. I have
Yeah,
another
yeah,
book for you," and he hands me The Way of the Pilgrim.
oh yeah. Yep.
And start out with that first. So I read The Way of the Pilgrim, and I started to immediately practice the Jesus Prayer, and I attended services, and I went there for about nine months to his house all the time, um, and got to know them very, very well. And then I had a friend out of the blue reach out to me, and his name was Grayson, and he called me up and was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Oh, actually, he didn't call me. I didn't have a phone. He drove over to my house in his pickup truck once, and he's like, "What are you doing here, man? Like, you don't call me, you don't check in with me. You're totally MIA. I have no idea what's going on with you. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Nobody knows anything about where you're at. I didn't even know you were still here. Uh, let's go out tonight, and I want to take you out. Like, let's just go to the lodge, which the lodge was just this place in Applegate Valley, where the locals go, and you just go on a Wednesday night, and the musicians come out of the woodworks from all over the fourth communities, and they play music together. So it's not un, it's not it's not unlikely that you wouldn't hear, the mandolin by somebody who's been playing mandolin his whole life, and guitarists and people who've played with the Grateful Dead, who are friends with them, and all these folks just kind of come out of the woodworks and play every Wednesday together at this lodge. And so I show up there with my friend Grayson, and this car pulls up next to us with a bunch of people that I kind of know, and some friends too. But there's one girl in particular, I don't know her at all, and nobody introduces us or anything like that. And I'm like, whatever, that's cool, because I'm like, by this point, I'm like, I'm gonna be a monk.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, I've got the mindset of, I know what a monastery is, and that's
Yep.
what I need in my life, and I'm going to go be a monk, and that'll solve all of my problems, because I don't know how to have relationships and be with girls or anything like that. So this is going to be my way of doing things. So um, I've already got this in my mind that I'm going to go to Platina Monastery
Mm-hmm.
and Father Seraphim's Monastery, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just show up on their doorstep. And I'm preparing my life, which means I can't have any debt, so I have to pay back my landlord for the month that I owe her. I have to, take care of any other relationship stuff with everybody else that I know, and like settle everything before I can go. So I'm planning on doing all of that over the next couple of weeks before I show up at this monastery. And all of this is leading up to my friend taking me out. So we go to Applegate Lodge, and we all hang out together, and everybody gets up to go smoke. And my and this young lady comes and sits down next to me, and we start talking, and we just have this incredible conversation where it's kind of interesting because so I'm sitting there and I got a little glass blowing kit of like pieces that I've blown, and I always bring it with me just in case I sell a piece. And she's like checking it out. She's like, "Whoa, these are cool." So okay, I've impressed her, but I don't want to I'm of two minds at this point. On one mind, I'm kind of falling back into old behavior pattern, which is I like a girl and she's attracted to me, and that's the road I want to go. But on the other hand, I'm also like already made up my mind that I'm going to go to a monastery. So I'm of two minds here, and I'm enjoying the experience of talking to this young lady, and she's super interested in me. And so I'm just going to be as completely real as I can with her, which I don't think I had ever really done with anyone before. So when she asks me, so like, tell me about yourself, what are you doing? And I tell her, well, I found the Orthodox faith about 9 months ago, and this is me, and I'm going to become a monk and all this stuff. And she's like, what's orthodoxy? And we start talking about that. Then like, she's just like hearing things that she'd never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking away from that conversation. I had it in my mind. We got to wrap up our conversation. And so I'm telling her, okay, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to like, if I give her my phone number, then she's probably going to call me. Like we're hitting it off. I can tell.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
probably going to call me, and then we're going to hang out. And I don't really want that to happen. So instead, this totally doesn't make sense now that I think about it, but every time I say it now, it's funny. But so instead, I'm going to ask her for her number, and then I have control over the situation because I won't call her.
Okay, okay.
So that's what I'm thinking. But what I'm not thinking, because I'm not thinking straight here, because if I had been thinking about it from her perspective, she's thinking, oh, he just asked for my number. He must be interested.
Yeah, of course, sure.
So I give up. I ask her for her number, and she gives it to me, and I'm like, cool, great, that's nice. It's really great to talk to you. We had a nice time. We even hugged, and I'm thinking I'm never gonna see this girl again. So I go home, and on the way home with my buddy Grayson who's driving, I can't shut up about her, and I noticed this about myself that I can't shut up about her. So I'm like, oh God, I'm in trouble. So I call up my priest the next day, and I'm like, Father, I don't trust myself. You're going to can you just tell me, like, here's what's going on in my life. Can you just tell me it's okay to go to the monastery?
Mm-hmm.
I need to go now.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go now. Is there anything I need to know about the monastery? And he's like, you can't just show up on a monastery doorstep and expect them to just take you in. Oh, hey, come on in, man. Like, and you're just going to now live there the rest of your life? That's not how it works. And I'm like, I'm so disheartened. I'm like, dude, I don't trust myself. I need an answer to what this is. I need something. I'll do whatever you tell me to do, Father, is what I tell him. I will do whatever you want me to do. Just tell me how to get out of this situation. I don't trust myself with women. I've never had a good relationship. I don't know the first thing about any of this. So please tell me what to do. And he says, okay. It's the best advice I've ever gotten from a priest. He says, you're not going to the monastery yet. I want you to get to know this girl for the next 6 months and become her friend, because you've never known how to be a friend to a woman.
Okay.
And in 6 months' time, the monastery will still be there. And if you want to go to the monastery at that point, I'll write a personal letter that says, take this guy in and please take him as a novice, and they'll probably take you in. But meantime, I need you to get to know this girl and just become her friend, because there might be something more to this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like
And I, so I was of two minds. So on one hand, I'm totally like, what are you talking about, old man? You're crazy. Like, that's not what I want. And then on the other hand, I'm like, oh, well, if it's not about what I want, it's about me being obedient to my priest.
Right. Right.
And I can get away with that. Okay, I can at least put the blame on him for a second.
Yeah.
If everything goes wrong, it's his fault. On the other hand, I was also relieved because I really just couldn't get this girl out of my mind.
Uh-huh.
Well, 3 months later, she and I have been spending time together a lot. She's interested in me. I'm interested in her. 3 months later, I asked her to marry me.
Wow, that quick, eh?
Yeah.
Woo! Okay.
Yeah, and she said yes, and that's the beginning of our love story. We've been together now 21 years,
That's
and
beautiful, man.
about to be a grandpa, and
Look
we
at
have three,
that.
three beautiful children together who are obedient and love God, and they seek to do good in their lives, and yeah, that's the love story, man. Like that's
God
it.
bless your family, brother. God bless your family.
Thank you, thank you. It's incredible. I'm incredible. I'm blessed beyond measure, and a lot of good things have happened in between then and now. But yeah, about 5 years ago, about 6 months before COVID, or well, less than 6 months before COVID, we moved to Texas, and our lives got immensely better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our
Mm-hmm.
focus became more and more on being obedient to God and following Him. But my wife, yeah, she followed me into the church. We both got baptized together, and
Did she have any like apprehensions at first? Was she Christian? What was her background going
her
into
background,
this?
well, she was raised a Jehovah's Witness, but then it wasn't really
Okay.
much of like her faith by the time that she was in high school. And
Okay.
so, she really, I don't think, I know that she's a pretty deep soul, but not, she's also very private. So it's not like she was like necessarily on a path to find God.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when she found me, it was kind of like the culmination in her life of everything leading up to a certain point as well, to where that she was receptive to what I said and
I
what I
see.
shared
I
with
see.
her,
Yeah.
and it piqued an interest in her to like find out what it was all about, and so she really quickly was along for the ride too. Yeah, yeah, and
That's awesome because
it
that's
didn't
not
take
always
long.
the case. That's
Yeah,
not always the case.
no,
Especially, and I mean, not especially, but well, actually, that's not true. A lot of people that came out of things like Jehovah's Witnesses that actually they're very apprehensive. I've noticed about looking at any because they realize it's a cult and all that. So that even in
yeah,
that's pretty interesting that she was open to it.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure a lot of like hanging out with you and like the weird at that time she might have looked at it as coincidence, but we realize it's God's providence. It's a lot to take in, and
So
when you're
she,
experiencing that, it kind of takes you for a ride on its very own.
it does like the whole experience if you just kind of allow yourself to be,
Yeah.
if you allow yourself and avail yourself to the experience.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's a roller coaster of a ride, but you can kind of, some people get the sense that the Lord is leading them. She definitely had that. She had an awareness that things leading up to that point were necessary, and that this was a part of her journey. Yeah, she definitely knew that.
That's beautiful,
Intuitively,
man.
she knew that, and also she had some experientially. She kind of also knew that, which I can't really get into because it's her own private part of her story.
Of
But
course, of course,
suffice
of
it to
course.
say that there were some things, some signals along the way that the Lord gave her that kind of prepared for this. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
in a real special way.
it's crazy because I've heard now quite a few stories by having these conversations, these convo with the Manos, or just even some interviews I've done in the past. And I love the fact that I can take all these stories and kind of see the common denominators, kind of see how people came to this point in their lives, and I have to say, after listening to so many of them and having these conversations privately, even too, quite a few private ones, you can really see the God's hand at work. You can really see it like thread through the story to the point where, as someone's telling me a story, I mean, I'm not trying to think ahead. I'm trying to be present to the story. But as they're telling the story, I know where like the next part, just because I've heard so many of them,
Yeah,
and there is a common thread, no matter how different they are. like no matter how like your background is a little bit more similar to Stevie's, but it's very different to my my good friend George, who was cradled, but his journey back to the faith very different than but like the upbringing is different, all that's different, the experiences are different, but the common thread is the same. It's very similar, and it's kind of like it has if I may, I mean, forgive me if this is incorrect, it has a particular, we're both chefs, it
Flavor.
has a particular flavor and scent.
Well,
Like
that's
I
yeah.
could
I've
see
thought
it.
about this. So the Lord has a personality.
Yes,
Like
exactly,
encountering Christ, he's a person. He has a
exactly.
personality.
Yes,
He has certain nuances about his personality where he has patterns of behavior. You can see it in
yes,
the Old Testament.
yes.
If you really get familiar with the Old Testament, which my priest is, and it's really great to like hear him discuss this. And I've gone through actually a long form biblical class with him, and
Father
you
Justin.
can pick. Oh yeah, with Father Justin, yeah, and
Okay.
you can see the pattern from Genesis, like all the way through the scriptures on
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
he relates to the people, how he relates to Israel, and how he kind of urges them along. The patterns are there. It's the same patterns that you and I are discussing about these individual lives as well.
Yep.
That Christ has a personality, and you see it.
Yep.
You see it in his actions and the way that he relates with people. And of course, just like any personality, you can never really 100% fully know someone else. But what you do find out, and I see, Orthodox family life talking about this right now, is in the lives of the
Mm-hmm.
saints. Is what I see is that uh, the more that we conform our lives to Christ, the more that also he kind of superimposes his a part of his personality on us, and that then as we live out lives that are being conformed to his image, we reflect his image outwardly, and we come to know, like other people come to know Christ through us in the same way.
I fully agree with that. Absolutely. And that's one thing I like about the Orthodox approach as opposed to a lot of other Christian denominations, whatever. When it's done, properly ish, it's not about forcing the message upon someone. It's not about jamming it down people's throats. It's about exemplifying these things. And then
Yeah,
people start asking you, yo, what happened, dude? Like, you changed. Like, but in a good way, they mean it. And one of the common things I hear in people's stories is that they become an exemplary human being, or they try to. They get closer and closer to that, where people notice and they start asking like, "What happened?" The other thing is, and it reminds me of that clip that I'm obsessed with of Metropolitan Neofito talking about the begging, like the wanting of God to like teach me, like do these things, and everyone's story has this moment of despair. I
yeah,
mean, forgive me, like give me a second on this one. I know other people will claim this from other faiths or belief structures, whatever, and I'm not trying to be like condescending to them, but I've heard it all coming from my background. I've heard them all. But the begging isn't the same. The begging that I hear in those stories, whether someone's going, whatever, I don't want to pick a sect. I'm not referring necessarily to Christians. I'm talking about outside of the Christian bubble. The begging is more of like a personal despair. It's like you can't take the punishment anymore. Help me from this. But I don't hear that from everyone else's stories that are in our circle, or people that are Orthodox, or even Christians in general that are not Orthodox. It's a type of spiritual yearning, a hunger, like a deep wanting, and that moment that you were talking about when you said that you're praying for God to show himself to you, to reveal his, you mentioned it a couple times in your story, but the very first story, the first time it reminds me of Christina's story of her begging in that Thanksgiving
yeah,
dinner she had, and it
yeah,
reminds me of like Stevie. He's in that moment. It's like a begging, like this,
yeah.
but it's not like, please save my mortal soul, like my mortal body. It's my soul. It's like, please, there's something on that level I want, I need, and I
Well,
have my
yeah,
version of that.
I agree. I think it's well, there's a breakdown of egotism and
Yep,
narcissism
absolutely.
to the point where we don't want to just be changed for our own sake, but we want to be changed because we don't want to hurt anybody else anymore.
That's a good
We
point.
don't want
That's a good point.
to live a life that isn't worth something, and that's actually the part of it is that we're dying, and we say this prayer to the Theotokos all the time. You know, we have no other help save thee.
Mm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and we realize something, and this is written about even in the scriptures. St. Paul says, that you know I believe, I believe, but I also incredibly understand this. Is in the scripture it says, "I believe, help thou my unbelief."
Mm.
This is a prayer that
Yes.
St. John of Kronstadt used to say all the time. I believe, help thou my unbelief.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And this is an understanding of, like, I know that I don't have the answers, and I know that I'm getting in my own way,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to get in my own way anymore. And,
Exactly.
and I'm willing to let go of whatever thing is in the way of you, God, changing me.
Yep. Yep.
And I know that it's me that has to change.
Yep. Exactly.
Nothing else except needs
It's
except me
it's the
needs to change.
quarter. It's the quarter. It's the quarter that you had in your pocket. The last thing you had is that
Yeah,
quarter. In that moment, you had a decision. You had a choice.
yeah,
You had to decide. You had to make that decision, and you
yeah,
chose to call your mom. And
yeah.
that was that is like the choice points God gives. It seems, and I'm not trying to preach. I'm just saying
No,
from
it's true.
looking at people's lives. I'm just
Yeah,
threading all the stories I've heard,
yeah,
and the conversations I've had, and my experiences.
yeah,
And there's always that moment, that last quarter you have in your pocket, and you can choose what you do with that quarter. But that decision, to go with God, it's kind of like He'll help you. You just have
yeah,
to ask for help, and that help has to be like true. And
yeah.
that decision to put that coin into the telephone back in the day, punch those buttons or spin that little dial to call your mom, that's your commitment to God. It seems like, I don't know if that's the case, but
Yeah,
from
yeah.
hearing
Well,
you say, it seems that.
God doesn't. I mean, the Lord doesn't need sacrifices. What He needs is a broken and contrite heart to work with. And when you have a broken and contrite heart, when you have something that's the thing that He can work with. But you also have to then sacrifice. Once
Yep.
you've been
Yep.
humbled
Yep.
and you realize that you can't
Yes.
do it on your own.
Yes.
I've spoken to people about this before. The relationship with the Lord is with Jesus is a game of hot potato with
Okay.
your will.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And
Okay.
so you take the hot potato and you give your will back to God, and then God says good, and then He makes it better and He gives it back to you,
Uh-huh.
and then you have a chance, like, what do I want to do with this? And you give it back to Him, because if you don't give it back to Him, um, then what are you going to do with it? It's a game of hot potato. It's a hot potato, right? This is the will, and
I
the
like
will
that.
has to be, you can only do something with your will. You can use your will for your own
Mm-hmm.
purposes, or you can
Mm-hmm.
give it back to the one who actually gave it to you in the first place. And the
Whoa,
whole
okay.
point to your life, your purpose, should be constantly an outpouring or a giving of the Lord to Him, of the thing that He gave you Himself. And so, this is seen within the church. I mean, even within the liturgical prayers of the church, where we find that, and maybe there's people out there who don't know this yet, but listen and pay attention to this when you come to church, is that God gave us wheat and grape, and then we take wheat and grape and make what man makes best out of wheat and grape, which
Mm-hmm.
is, we make bread and
Mm-hmm.
wine,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
and then we give it to God.
Mm-hmm.
The priest gives it to God on
Mm-hmm.
behalf of the people,
Mm-hmm.
and then, because He's ordained to, and then God takes the best of what we've given to Him, the first fruits of what we've given to Him, and then He makes it even better by pouring literally His Holy Spirit into it, and then telling us to consume it, and then we take it and we put it inside us, and now that it's inside us, then He gives us His Spirit with that, and then what do we do with it except give it back to Him by giving it then to the world, to others. And then this is just a constant cycle, a circular relationship between God and man, working in synergy with each other, when we continue to learn how to give our will back. And it becomes infectious. It becomes addicting to want to give ourselves back to Him, just to see what He's going to do with it next. And He's doing the same thing. I'm just going to give it back to you to see what you do with it next. And we
Pause for one
grow.
second here. One second here. This is, first of all, I have a couple questions. where did the hot potato analogy come from?
I don't know. Just
Okay. Well, no, what you said here is extremely important. And I'll tell you why. For me personally, everything you said really, right? All of what you just said there, from hot potato to grapes and wheat, like everything you just said there is very important to me. I'll tell you why. It feels extremely true, and it's like an aha moment. So I want to really pause here for a second, because this is the crux of everything for me that I'm taking out of this conversation is this. And I'll tell you another reason why is because Justin Marler has done something to me. Like, I don't mean that I mean in a really good way. And he's like, the conversations I've had with him. And okay, let me just say this. I'm not fanboying. It wasn't any of that. I've met many people that I could have throughout my whole life. No, because I just don't want anyone to think that that's the case.
Okay.
I've met a lot of, like, when I was at a record label, and I've been blessed to meet, like, you know, Chuck D. Like, you can name, like, people that I had as high, you know, on my list. And I was always disappointed, and it was something I just don't like doing. There was actually, like, I had a chance to meet Les Claypool, for example. And I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to be bothered. So to get that out of the way, I'm not fanboying. When I started talking to him, and we started having conversations, his humbleness is legit.
Yeah.
It's very true. It's very real. And there's something about the way he communicates that there's something I knew I didn't understand about the faith that I wasn't being able to figure out my whole year and a half that I'm in. I'm not saying I figure any of it now. I have it all figured out now, but I'll just say this about why I brought up Justin. I asked him once about, like, how are you so humble? And his response, I don't want to give it just because it's not doesn't sound personal, but it was the most real answer I've received. And it was as basic as, like, I've experienced a lot of death in my life, and there's nothing about that that's not going to humble you, that kind of thing. But what I liked is that he actually answered it. He didn't give me answers like I hear from a lot of people, like, oh, I'm not humble. He acknowledged that he was, and or trying to be, and then he explained where it came from. And then the last time when he was on the stream on Sunday, he mentioned about will. And God wills it, God wills it. And I don't like that. And he started explaining it. And what he was trying to say was that there has to be some sort of action. So what you just said there, and I was trying to figure it out the whole time. Like, I agreed with him in a secular way. And then as an Orthodox Christian, I was trying to understand that. I'm sorry if this doesn't make sense. I'm going to tie it all together right here. What you just said kind of completed that circle for me. It kind of tied that bow. Whereas, like, it's like a participation. He wills something of you. You do your best to do that, and then you give it back, and you wait for his will and back and forth. It's like a participation that really builds on it. That started to go off on a tangent there, but, like, it really brought this home for me. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank God.
You tied it all together for me there.
Thank God.
It really. I think I'm going to try to even see if I can clip that and put it in the video I'm working on now that was based on one that we did on Sunday, which I took down.
Yeah.
I might throw that in there as an answer. I'll see if it fits. It's good. I like it. Thank you. I appreciate that. Dare I say that? Sorry, to say one more last thing. Having these conversations, I even ask myself, like the convos with the Mano type thing.
Yeah.
Like, I get something from it. I know, and I know, like, a lot of people in our community definitely get something out of everybody's stories for a number of different reasons. And I don't know how to put this, and I don't mean it the way it's going to sound. Like, I definitely don't mean it. It feels like actual, not therapy, but yeah, kind of.
Oh yeah, it's cathartic.
It's cathartic, and it feels like the person I'm speaking to gets something like that, and then I get something from the story, and then the audience gets something. So that reminds me of your potato there.
Yeah.
Kind of like works its way around, and then everybody hears other people's stories, and then they can relate to them, or they realize that they might have misjudged somebody, and it may not even be the person I'm speaking to. It could be someone in their life, right? Like they might have, like, someone might hear your story, and then they might have a cousin who's going through addiction issues, and they're like, whoa, a lot of what Germanus is saying, I see in my cousin. There is hope here. There is a way. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So I thought I'd throw that in there because it's something that I've been asking myself, like, what's going on here with these convos? Like, I'm not really getting it. And I think I'm starting to get it now.
Yeah, I think you are. Well, hey, brother, I got to get going, and
No worries, no
yeah,
worries.
it's been a long day. So God bless you, man,
You
and
too, brother. Thank you so much for
love
doing
you.
this. I
It's good to
will.
talk.
I love you as well. I'll give you a shout soon.
All right, all right,
Adios.
adios.
Take it easy, buddy. Okay. So to everyone out there listening, I think this episode, there's a lot to take away from this. Joannis' story, I think. I mean, can't say necessarily a lot of, because there's so many aspects of it and so many different chapters. We started off by saying that it was kind of like a '90s Forrest Gump. I can kind of see why that was the way someone explained it. But it seems like I was saying with Germanus, there are a lot of people's stories out there, a lot of your stories out there for those of you guys that are in the community, which I'm assuming is everyone that's listening now. There's value to them, and I'm addicted to hearing people's stories. And I'm starting to get a better understanding of why I'm attracted to doing this, to having these convos with the Mano. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed that. And I will definitely be seeing you guys soon. I definitely have an interesting interview tomorrow that I'll be doing. It'll be a pre-record. I can't wait to tell you guys about it after it's done. God bless you guys and have a wonderful day.